This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
3 minutes after 10, a very good morning to you. That's nice. Paul getting in there early with this text simply says Trump has done a Truss. Mate, he's making Liz Truss look like a financial genius at the moment. Because we are, as human beings, primed, aren't we, to order a slice of wait-and-see pie, whatever situation we find ourselves in. Until we are truly compelled to act, we often don't. And I wonder whether that is what Keir Starmer is doing, munching away on various slices of wait-and-see pie. I don't know, but I do know that other world leaders have elected to retaliate, have come out punching, swinging, are clearly determined not to mule how high as the Mango Mussolini shouts, jump, from the Oval Office. I don't know what the correct answer. I've said this to you all week, but it's one of those stories that straddles that distinction that I talk to you about quite often. There are topics for our time together. There are things that happen in the news that will be extremely fertile ground for us to have a bit of a natter of a morning. And then there are huge stories that are not. It's not the same thing. If it was the same thing, then we'd all come on air every day and do an hour's phone-in about the three biggest stories of the moment. And this story falls between both stools. I think the gulf between people who pay a lot of attention to the news and people who don't is never bigger than on a story like this. And it's a gulf of gradations as well. It's a graduated gulf. The more attention you pay to the news, arguably, the more confused you might be by what is going on, or at least the harder you're finding it to find a firm position and cling to it. Because, not just because the inconsistency and the complete upending of almost a century of norms is so complete and so violent, but also because, at risk of sounding like Donald Rumsfeld or my old geography teacher, nobody knows. Nobody knows. Even he doesn't know. This, I think, was our big breakthrough of the week, wasn't it? Our big breakthrough of the week was the idea that he doesn't know what happens next. He's got a vague idea of what he wants to happen, and that involves people abasing themselves, people shuffling in. Do you know, there was a kid at my prep school who was rumoured to go to communion during the school holidays on his knees. He'd shuffle up the aisle on his knees, and that's kind of, I often get an image of that lad. He never did it at school, but I often get an image of that lad who... When I think about what Donald Trump wants from people, he wants them to come into the Oval Office shuffling on their knees, doesn't he? Like some sort of medieval Mongol monarch. I mean, obviously, want Keir Starmer to do that, but plenty of people that have crossed Donald Trump in the past have done that sort of thing metaphorically. They have taken the knee for him in ways that seemed absolutely inconceivable when they were telling the truth about the man and sharing their honest views. So here it is. Retaliate or negotiate? 0345 6060 973. The Financial Times already reports, and that's a really good example of what I was trying to talk about. I hope it doesn't sound condescending. I often don't read the Financial Times. I always try to, but nobody's perfect. But it obviously steers a slightly more serious course than pretty much every other news outlet in this country. And the Financial Times is already reporting on countries preparing to if you like, capitulate. I mean, we could call it negotiate. There's another question for you. What's the difference between negotiate and capitulate? Trump doesn't really want to negotiate. I also find myself thinking about his bankruptcies quite a lot this morning. So, in other words, what happens if he has a plan? What happens when it fails? Answer, he just goes bust. Leaves loads of people owed money and moves on. Is it 6 times he's gone bankrupt? He even went bankrupt running a casino. That's an extraordinary achievement, isn't it, by any standards? I think even I could earn a few quid. Even I could make a few quid running a casino. And the house always wins, right? Or at least the house is always on top, except apparently when Donald Trump runs it. So when he goes bankrupt, he waltzes off into the sunset, relatively unscathed, borrows a ton of money from Russians, and starts another business. Can't do that here, at least I hope he can't, but it perhaps displays an attitude. So even, I read one column in the Daily Mail today, arguably the worst column I've ever read in 40 years of reading British newspapers. No prizes for guessing who it was by. Richard Littlejohn talking about how this is all about the art of the deal. A book Donald Trump didn't even write and hasn't read, according to the bloke that did actually write it. This mythology that's built up around him is pathetic. Easy to understand, of course. Trump has given people permission to be bigoted and misogynistic and racist again. He's brought it back into the mainstream. And for some people, that is the greatest gift he could ever have given them. So they will never be able to turn. They will never be able to admit the truth. People who used anti-woke as a phrase that supposedly meant something will always love him because he's made it acceptable again. He's made it mainstream again, not just to be misogynistic, but also to boast about sexually assaulting women, and to try to remove black people from American history. So we know all that. I'm not making light of it, but that is all. That's all on the record. That's not an opinion. That's just counting. But the idea that he's embarked on some 4D chess master plan designed to rewire or recalibrate the entire framework of international trade is ridiculous. He's putting the frighteners on people in the hope that they'll roll over and do whatever it is that he wants. And at this point in time, he can't even tell you what it is that he wants. This is interesting from Karen. Eleanor and I have been having conversations along this theme this week. Starmer has no ego, which is his superpower. We started nibbling at the edges of a question that we'll ask you at some point in the next couple of weeks. Do you know who Keir Starmer is? And the idea that might actually be a strength. I see him as someone who doesn't have an ideology, he just has a toolkit, which is appropriate, because his father was a toolmaker. And whether he's any good at it or not, of course, is moot. But he sees his job as to approach problems with his toolkit and to try to fix the problem. There is no ego and there is no ideology, which is almost unique in the annals of modern politics and possibly makes the question of what he should do, retaliate or negotiate, easier to answer. But I'm going to need the why of it. And I think the answer might be, I don't want to shoot your fox or close the conversation down before it's even started, that you look like, that you try to negotiate until you retaliate. But what does retaliation look like? I've been thinking quite a lot about this overnight as well. We've had a couple of calls, didn't we, this week that were really clever. I think the one I liked the most, and I can't remember the fella's name, I do apologise, was the chap who simply said that we shouldn't do anything. Two things could happen. Either it will spool out, either it will blow up, a bit like Liz Truss's economic adventures did, or a new world order will be established and we have to work out where we fit into it. But you don't have to be a catalyst. You don't have to be part of the, you might say problem, but let's say project, just to be diplomatic. You don't have to be part of it. And all that you can do by way of retaliation is to make things in your own country more expensive for your own people. So retaliation is a weird word. The two words of the week are reciprocal and retaliation. Quite close to each other in the dictionary, I suppose. Not adjacent, but these are the two words of the week. Reciprocal and retaliation. They're not reciprocal tariffs. They are not tit for tat or like for like. They are nonsensical calculations designed to exert as much pressure as possible on countries. And oddly, the poorer you are, the more pressure is being exerted upon you. So reciprocal is one word of the week. But I wonder whether retaliation is similarly inadequate. It's not a retaliation. Is it? I mean, was it a retaliation? I know he won, but, spoiler alert. When David fired his slingshot at Goliath, was it a retaliation? According to all the odds, Goliath had it in the bag, until David found a suitably sized pebble and loaded up his slingshot. Is it a retaliation? And don't you have to be capable of going at least close to toe-to-toe to retaliate? If I was in the ring with Vladimir Klitschko and he punched me, I don't think you could call my response retaliation. Could you? Capitulation, perhaps, or simple knockout. I mean, that would be it. I'd be flat on the canvas. So I don't know. We're not flat on the canvas, so we can do something. But what? What? I'm never going to get bored of this question until we actually get an answer to it provided by Keir Starmer. But in the meantime, it has to be provided by you. So there it is. Oh, that's strong. Yes, sorry, you could be right. Stephen says, Steph, I beg your pardon, says, I thought the word of the week was groceries. If you don't know what that's about, I may enlighten you a little bit later in the programme. That was a moment, wasn't it? But no, the words of the week are reciprocal because they're not, even though everybody has to use that word because technically they are. They're not reciprocal in any truly substantive meaning of the word. Reciprocal means I do something, you do something back. They're not reciprocal because the countries that are being hit with these tariffs haven't really done anything except abide by the rules of international trade, for which they are now being punished. And retaliation, which suggests that you can sort of do something to hurt him and hurt the United States or hurt the project, hurt the White House. And there it is. I don't know I've ever asked the question, and it's partly because we've been governed by absolute clowns for so long, up until, I don't include Rishi Sunak on the list of clowns. You may not be happy about that, but I don't. But prior to that, we've been governed by absolute clowns for so long that we've forgotten what proper politics looks like. Proper politics is difficult and complicated and detailed, and it doesn't lend itself to newspaper headlines or Daily Mail columns pretending that this nightmare is somehow good news for Brexiters. Is it not 0.4% the difference between a 10% tariff and a 20% one, compared to 5% hit to GDP caused by Brexit? It is literally saying, how did Ed Davey describe it yesterday? We're celebrating because he punched our friends in the eye and only gave us a wedgie. That's quite strong from Ed Davey. But that question of retaliation or negotiation is the only question in town at the moment. And what does it look like? What's your answer to that question? And what does retaliation look like? And what does negotiation look like? We need to start getting some flesh on these bones. All right, and I really need your help because I've said to you all week, I don't like phone-ins where I haven't got a clear and provable thesis on what's happening. When it comes to complicated politics, I like to think I know what's going on. But with Trump, you can't. You have to get over this. Sorry, I'm speaking to myself now. You have to get over this idea that you'll be able to work it out. You'll be able to come up with an objective algorithm to explain it all, like you did with Brexit. That you'll be able to predict every twist and every turn because you understood the facts. You knew what customs unions and single markets were. You understood the nature of third country status. You knew what the Good Friday Agreement contained. So you knew what would happen to Northern Ireland, even when people like Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg were insisting that that wasn't true. You knew that it was because you understood it. Even when the whole world was believing lies, you knew they were lies. You could hold on to the truth because you understood the facts. There's no facts to understand here. It's when I'm at my most insecure on the radio, which is when I need your help the most. Retaliation or negotiation? And if not, why not? If so, why? 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now. You will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Long texts as ever, and we'll hit the phones imminently. I guess today is one of those days where I need people who are normally earning far too much money to call me. I mean, is it just a case of waiting until the markets open on Monday and seeing what's happening? How quickly could this fall apart, and who is qualified to answer that question? I regret to report that I am not. Do you remember when Liz Truss unveiled her fiscal event and the Daily Mail described it as finally a true Tory budget? Nigel Farage described it as the best budget since, I think, 1986. It's incredible, isn't it, that these things get glossed over? Imagine if a Democrat president had done what Trump had done. Do you think the British newspapers would look a little bit different today? Reporting on epic economic impact in a way that they have still not done with regard to the economic impacts they told you to impose upon yourself in 2016. It's incredible, right? Absolutely incredible. But I think top of the class, gold star territory today, may even involve a mystery hour round of applause if you're lucky, but gold star territory today goes to anybody who can tell me how quickly it could conceivably fall apart. Okay? And I would never have asked that question before Liz Truss became Prime Minister. I wouldn't have thought that a world leader would be capable of introducing economic policies so obviously insane that almost everybody intelligent, and that obviously involves excluding the likes of the editors and political correspondents at the Daily Mail and Nigel Farage and everybody else who greeted Liz Truss's fiscal event with rounds of applause and pom-poms. But a world leader could do something so transparently insane that the markets, that amorphous term that covers so much, that the markets would chew them up and spit them out. Is Trump too big for that to happen? Could that happen to Trump? Conceivably, how quickly could this all fall apart? How large is the lettuce, in other words? And that is a question I should have asked you earlier this week, but better late than never, eh? 20 minutes after 10 is the time. Fiona is in Hillhead. Fiona, what do you think?
Hi, James. I was just saying, I don't think this has got anything to do with global politics or anything else. I think it comes down to me for the fact that Trump is just a narcissist. And like narcissists everywhere, my daughter works in with some high-profile sort of high-wealth people.
Yes.
And what they love to do is cause chaos around them. So whether it's a small scale, it's in the office, setting employees off, one said this. It's all very, very small-minded. But this is just on a global scale. He wants to set countries up against each other, as he started doing from the day he got into power. And then sit back and watch the fallout. He doesn't care about results. So effectively, there's really nothing Starmer can do about it, except damage limitation, perhaps.
Well, I mean, we'll get on to the question of what damage limitation looks like, but if I was to set out my two stalls this morning, they've published, I think, a 400-page document of things that we could stick tariffs on. So that would involve retaliation. And then on the other poll, in the other stall, you've got the idea of reducing things that we already charge. So reducing tariffs on things that we're already importing into this country from America. So he can go either way on things like that. There is a choice in front of him. It's just a question of time, isn't it? The more I talk about it, the more I think it's a question of time. When does this become an urgent question?
And potentially time wasting, because whatever he wants to do, he will do. And this, I believe, and it's just my very small opinion, is that his narcissism outweighs every other thing about his character and his agenda. And, why engage with the madness? Just step away. Let's get out of the 10% if that's what we can do, and let him get on with it, because we're powerless over whatever he's going to do. And so is everybody around him.
Yeah. And yet the Financial Times reports this morning that other countries are already sort of putting together sweeteners and negotiating and talking about what they might be able to offer him that would soften his approach. Is there not a danger? Final question.
Yeah.
Is there not a danger that, if you're right, the point you're missing perhaps is that means we all have to start fighting like rats in a sack to be favoured or the least discriminated against? His son almost. Yes,
that's his agenda.
But that's going to happen, so we have to start fighting each other.
Yeah, exactly. So he's won.
Well, that's it. What's the next topic, Fiona? What should we do now? Parking tickets? There it is.
Give me 5 minutes. I've just got out of the shower. I'll come back to you.
That's fair enough. It's all over. He's already won. I don't think he has. But that is the problem with again, we're still doing it. Fiona doing it rather brilliantly there. Why is it that male callers to the programme never self-deprecate or say this is only my small opinion, when actually she smashed it out of the park diagnostically? His narcissism is the most important thing about him. And it is why turning up with your medicine bag of treatments for traditional ailments is pointless. Turning up with your toolbox of tools for traditional problems is pointless. And turning up on your radio show with the thought processes and the tactics that are the ones that you need to unravel traditional knots is not pointless, but peculiarly unsatisfying, right? But Keir Starmer has to make a decision. That's not in the realms of speculation. He has to do something. Even if he does nothing, nothing is something in this context. Not to get too philosophical on you. Tony's in Belfast. Tony, what do you reckon?
Morning, James. A long-time listener, first-time caller.
Welcome, Tony. Welcome.
Listen, the more I see and hear of Trump, the more he reminds me, I don't know if you've read it, the more he reminds me of Zaphod Beeblebrox from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah, I haven't read it for a while, but I know what you mean.
He was the ultimate narcissist.
Yes.
I mean, he once came up with the line and said, if there's anything more important than my ego around here, I want it caught and shot now. But the thing about the sort of the role that he played, the president of the galaxy, he didn't actually wield any power per se. He was a means of distracting away from the actual real wielding of the power. That's what makes me think, Trump is a complete narcissist. He's obviously a complete moron. But is he a useful idiot? Is he a useful idiot for the people who are actually carrying out the agenda that they want to carry out? by which I mean...
every single flipping rock that we lift up has got 100 rocks underneath it. Because again, they think he is. People like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, they think he is. But if he's proved anything over the course of his entire life, a bit like Boris Johnson, whether professionally, personally or politically, is to go back to Fiona's point, because his narcissism, and your point, because his narcissism trumps everything, he'll turn on anyone. So even if they think he is a useful idiot, he might turn out not to be. Do you see what I mean? He might do on a Monday the thing that Elon Musk wants, but on a Tuesday he's bringing in tariffs that are going to hit Tesla.
But that's what I mean. The flipping and the flopping and the going from one thing to another, it's a distraction from what's really going on in the background, the real hard and fast changes that are being made to American society as we speak.
And they are probably designed to achieve one thing, which is to, and I hesitate to say this, and I will happily have a slice. I'll tell you what, I'll swap my wait and see pie for a fat slice of humble pie if this one turns out to be wrong, but edging ever closer to the possibility of him trying to hang on for a third term and more, for him trying to hold on to power despite democracy.
Well, exactly. And that's exactly what the right wing in America, especially the hard right of the Republican Party, would want, for there to be no opposition to them pushing through their agenda.
And then they can do everything that they want, and we're back to some sort of medieval feudalism, all of which leads inevitably, inexorably, to the question, what does Starmer do now?
Oh, that's a good question. I said to your researcher earlier on, I think the only person who's actually come out of this with any sort of dignity intact is Mark Carney. He's the only one who's actually come up with and actually said and stood up to Trump as a bully. Because I've dealt with bullies in the past myself, James, and the only way to stand up to bully is to stand up to them. Because the only thing,
I mean, this is the narrative of our childhoods. But some people who stand up to bullies ended up getting knocked out and traumatized.
Oh yeah, I've been pummeled myself many times standing up to bullies. But you have to keep your dignity intact, don't you?
Yes, well, I mean, you do, and I do in these kind of contexts. But does a prime minister? Does it sound a little bit like British exceptionalism again, when we think we're somehow in a position to hit back? What with?
I got to be honest with you. When I read that Keir Starmer said that he liked and respected Trump, the gorge rose in my throat. It really did. Because how can you like and respect the man?
Spoiler alert: he doesn't, but he has to say that. That's diplomacy in a freaking nutshell, mate.
But he doesn't have to say it.
Well, he would argue that he does. And what would happen if he didn't? And then, of course, you hit back at me by saying, well, he did so because he was hoping to secure some sort of special treatment by way of this programme of what you would call sycophancy. I might still call diplomacy. The truth probably lies somewhere between the two. And we got no special treatment whatsoever. We got treated exactly the same as every other country on the planet, according to this ludicrous calculus that they got off ChatGPT. And that is not a figure of speech or a throwaway line. I've been shown evidence that suggests it was either put together under George W. Bush's administration by someone who never thought it would ever come to pass, or they got it off ChatGPT. So all of the, I respect and admire him stuff has failed so far. The problem is, it would be hard to say to Keir Starmer, therefore you should stop with it now, because the prize is still there. The prize of preferential treatment is still there, Tony.
Well, perhaps your previous caller got it right and just said we just have to get on with what we're doing and do the best with the situation that we have in hand.
And that involves scrapping with our rivals for favoured status while simultaneously trying to recalibrate a world in which America is completely dominant. And this is why I think the cleverest thing we've done together this week is spot the parallels between talking about his abandonment of military supremacy and his economic policy. The complete betrayal of Ukraine earlier this administration, the complete betrayal of all his allies, including ones with free trade deals. Another point. The thing with Farage is you never know whether he's stupid or lying. And don't remind me it could be both. He talks about, if only we had a trade deal, this wouldn't have happened. Every country that has a trade deal with the United States of America got hit with tariffs calculated according to exactly the same reasoning as we did. So, I mean, it is either a really thick intervention or a really dishonest intervention, or possibly both. A new deal that would involve us saying, what would you like? What have we got that you would like? And, of course, talking about Farage, an act of treachery almost unparalleled in British history, would be to reduce the power of your own nation, to hobble your own kingdom shortly before an attack by an enemy state. So nobody knew that this was on the horizon. But if you take a putative threat, a theoretical threat, and remember, these people were spouting bilge about a European army somehow being a problem for the people who were in it. So if you just accept that on the horizon, at some unspecified point in the future, these islands may come under economic attack from an administration that wishes us ill, right? What is the single worst thing that you could do in preparation for that moment? Answer, weaken yourself economically. Answer, introduce friction to your international trade. Answer, detach yourself from your biggest international trading partner. Answer, introduce barriers, introduce red tape, introduce regulation, make it harder to trade, make it harder to thrive, make it harder to prosper. The single worst thing you can do in anticipation of an economic attack from a foreign administration that wishes you ill is to weaken your own economy in the first place, which makes Brexit arguably the greatest act of self-inflicted national treachery in the history of humanity. That may be slightly hyperbolic, but hey-ho, it's Friday. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
34 is the time. Rod points out we got the same deal as the Penguins. So I think maybe for now we just sit back and suck it up. If you don't know what he's referring to, so clumsy, shall we say, or cack-handed was the calculation used to determine tariffs. That not only, it looks like they've done it using internet domains. So it looks like they got the calculation itself off ChatGPT or out of George W. Bush's wastepaper basket. And the way that they've identified territories has been done by internet domains. So it's why countries that are actually, or territories that are actually French have been hit with different tariffs from France itself. And there's one example that's been cited already of a tiny, tiny, tiny territory. In fact, I'll find it for you because the detail is, well, I don't want to say beautiful. That would be making light of a very serious point. But the detail is close to unbelievable. It involves some mislabeled goods being exported from a tiny, tiny territory that created a situation in which the Norfolk Island, is that the one that Fletcher Christian ended up on after the mutiny of the Bounty? Is that Norfolk Island? I think it might be. So Norfolk Island has been hit with a dramatically higher tariff than the rest of Australia. Would you like to know why? Because 2 shipments of Timberland boots from the Bahamas and some aquarium supplies from the UK that had their point of origin mislabeled or misrecorded. So the numbers there are so tiny that even something as apparently irrelevant as that anomaly there, 2 shipments of hiking boots and some aquarium supplies from the UK having their point of origin mislabeled, when you fed it through the algorithm that these clowns have deployed, it left Norfolk Island with a much higher tariff than the rest of Australia. There are also, the reference to the Penguins, uninhabited islands with no, well, they're uninhabited. So, spoiler alert, the US isn't trading with them. But Donald Trump stuck tariffs on them anyway, because he's a very stable genius. All of which leads to the question of what Keir Starmer should do, retaliate or negotiate. 10:37 is the time. Paul is in Hook in Hampshire. Paul, what would you like to say?
No, just there's the emotion around this and the name calling and Trump's this, Trump's that, Trump's the other. I don't know why everybody's so surprised. When he was going for election, he said he was going to do this. Everybody knew he was going to do it.
Everybody kept telling us to ignore what he said and concentrate on what he did. You remember?
I do, but again, we've got short memories. When he was, in his first term, he said he would do a number of things, and he did.
Well, he did. He said he was going to end the war in Ukraine on day one. He said the stock market would go up and he'd make everyone richer. You now have the Swiss investment bank UBS, widely regarded as a leader in this field, predicting an inevitable recession with growth GDP.
We'll see. We'll see in time, but, this happened 2 days ago. My point's very simple. He said he was going to do this. He's done it. The emotion and the response is quite ridiculous, I think, in terms of, he will want deals. He wants to make a deal with people. This is his way of doing it. No, you don't need to like it. None of us need to like it. But name calling and saying he's this, that, and the other, I just don't think it takes anybody anywhere.
You've been a bit woke, Paul. A little bit of name calling, a little bit of mischief, a little bit of fun. It keeps us all honest.
I'm the least woke.
Keeps the conversation fresh.
Least woke bloke in the world.
Yeah, I thought you might be.
In the world.
So, what should Starmer do in this context then?
Well, I think the first thing is, it's 10%. I think that was probably better than the UK thought it was going to be. I think...
no, it's exactly the same as every other country in the same situation as us.
Yeah, except Europe.
No, they're not in the same situation as us. They have a different trade balance, a different balance of trade. So any country with a comparable balance of trade to us gets the 10%. There's no special treatment there whatsoever.
Okay, so that's where we are. Trump is looking after America. It's his country. It's not our country.
You've just said it's going to go into recession. Its own stock market. They've lost $2 trillion. How is that looking after America? No, I will, but you're going to have to address the question of how is a $2 trillion loss overnight looking after America?
Well, he's talking 1 day, 2 days. Let's see what it's like in 3 months. Who knows? I don't know, and nor do you. And nor does anybody else.
You just said he's looking after America, and I've just said he's just lost trillions of dollars. So in the context, so in the context of now, he's hitting America really, really hard. But at some unspecified point in the future, things might go really well. Did you vote for Brexit?
Pardon?
Did you vote for Brexit?
I did.
Yeah. And this was the same argument we heard then.
Well, no, but Starmer is the leader of Britain. Hang on, Starmer's the leader of Britain. Because we are on our own, he can decide what the government decides to do in response to these tariffs. Now, he can retaliate. That's up to him. He's our leader. Yeah, he needs to look after Britain. Yeah, that's his country, and the Swiss need to look after the Swiss, etc., etc. And it all goes around like that.
Yes.
Because that's what Trump's doing.
So, what do you think looking after Britain would look like? And you can't keep saying that Trump is looking after America because he's just tanked trillions of dollars from the American economy. They've laid off car workers in America temporarily as a direct result of the impacts his tariffs will have upon their overseas operations. But you knew that.
Well, I know that, but I think, Rome isn't built in 2 days, and nor's a response. We're talking about 2 days.
But this is Brexit again.
Yeah, but you're talking 2 days.
But I'm talking $2 trillion.
You know the market's probably better than I do.
When's the last time $2 trillion were lost overnight? US stocks plunged.
I have no idea.
But doesn't it matter, though, to your optimism, especially after your vote for Brexit went so badly? Doesn't this idea of sticking all your eggs in things are going to be great at some unspecified point in the future, haven't you kind of got bored of that yet?
I just think people are so surprised by something he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
And he's done it. Now, the response will be interesting. I think, he prides himself, if people want to call him a narcissist, he prides himself on being the art of the deal. What he wants to do is to negotiate.
Well, he didn't write that book.
Well, no, I know. You're right.
Do you know what happened the last time they brought in tariffs like this?
Oh, God, no. I haven't got a clue.
But doesn't it matter, Paul?
No, because I think that...
No, that's why I find conversations like this fascinating. You voted for Brexit. You're making all the same arguments about Brexit. Brexit was an undiluted catastrophe, but this one will go really well.
Well, I'm not sure it was a catastrophe, was it?
What's your favourite bit?
Pardon me?
What's your favourite bit?
My favourite bit is, you've probably got a point, actually. It's about controlling entry and exit from the country.
How's that worked out for you?
That's probably, you have a point.
Yeah, and we could, of course, have controlled it a lot more robustly before you voted for it. So the thing you voted for has been a catastrophe. The reason why you voted for it has got immeasurably worse, but you believed things would be brilliant at some unspecified point in the future, and here you are making exactly the same arguments about Donald Trump.
Well, no, what I'm saying is, I think... No, hang on.
I have hung on.
It's about the people. It's about the people, who are leading, this country. Yeah, and it should be very easy for this country to control its borders. They don't, because the government before and this government are useless.
See, I have a theory that everybody who likes Trump and Brexit is obsessed with immigration. And here you are talking about $2 trillion losses that America has taken overnight, saying, hey, wait and see, it might all turn out to be brilliant. But what you really, really care about is immigration.
No, I don't. I think I care about it.
Why'd you bring it up then?
Well, you brought it up. I didn't.
No, I didn't. I asked what your favourite bit of Brexit. I asked what your favourite bit of Brexit was. I asked what your favourite bit of Brexit was.
I gave you an example. You're right. Yeah, but no.
So, what is your actual favourite bit of all the things that have happened? Yeah, and Brexit has played out, which is why the parallel is so interesting. So, of all the things that have happened, what's your favourite bit?
Of Brexit?
Yeah.
I think just controlling your own laws.
Which ones do we control now that we didn't control before?
There's a lot now that we're not impacted by the EU that we were. I didn't like being dictated to by Brussels.
Like, on what? On what?
Well, whatever the silly laws came out of them.
Go on, then, give me one.
You know.
Give me one.
Oh, come on, you know there were loads.
I can't think of one, but you can, because you know that there are loads. Go on, give me one.
Don't be silly.
Give me one law.
Out of Brussels, there were loads out of
Brussels. Give me one. Why is that funny? Lots. You voted for it. There are lots, and you can't name one.
Well, Brussels, we didn't have control of our own laws.
For example?
I can't think of an example.
Well, I'll wait.
Pardon me?
I'll wait.
You'll have a long way. I can't think of an example.
No, but you're bound to be able to, because there's loads. Paul just told me. So I'll wait.
You're very good, but no.
No, I'm not. I just care about facts.
Anyway, we're not talking about Brexit.
No, I am. I'm waiting now.
You're waiting. The economy, let's wait and see.
No, tell me the thing that's gone really well. You said the law that you're pleased about.
My point is, let's wait and see. I think many countries...
I'm waiting to see what law you're going to tell me about.
Hang on. Well, we'll negotiate, and Starmer can negotiate for the Britain.
Don't change the subject.
For Europe.
Don't change the subject. Paul.
He can negotiate.
Paul, time for one of your wry chuckles, I think, Paul, isn't it now? Time for a wry chuckle? I'm still waiting for the law, of which there are loads.
Well, one of the great benefits is that now we're in this situation...
What about bendy bananas?
Now we're in this situation.
3-pin plugs?
Can negotiate for Britain.
Wrapping your fish and chips in newspaper. What's the law you're happiest that you don't have to obey anymore?
In this situation, one of the greatest benefits is that Starmer can
just say there aren't any, Paul, because everybody listening knows.
Well, this is a great one, isn't it?
Go on. What's your law? Example. What's the law?
Well, no, hang on.
No, I'm not. I've hung on for long enough. What's the law you no longer have to obey that justifies your Brexit vote in 2016?
Well, I'll turn it around so answer the question.
No, you can't. So you have to ask. No, you can't. Just answer the question.
Europe are not going to negotiate for us. We're going to negotiate for ourselves. That's the difference.
It's 10:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
48 is the time. It's like Robbie Williams being bombarded by audience members asking him to do Angels when he wants to concentrate on his new material. But that was quite a nice little stroll down memory lane. And, of course, nothing has changed. And you know, Paul's hero, that's not fair, but the last caller's fellow Brexiter, Nigel Farage, continues to talk utter bilge about absolutely everything, and many, many people up and down the country continue to suck it up. Most obviously, perhaps, now in the context of Donald Trump, although his approval ratings here are incredibly low, so that parallel doesn't really work. It's more a case of the United States now knowing how we feel, or rather, sensible and informed people in the United States knowing how sensible and informed people in this country have been feeling since 2016 largely and 2019 specifically, none of which answers the question of what Keir Starmer should do. Mark Carney on the one hand, Emmanuel Macron on the same hand, Ursula von der Leyen coming out swinging, Japanese leaders, I think simultaneously trying to create an alternative world order, a new world order, while minimising the short-term impacts on their own countries. So leaning, I don't know, the needle between negotiation and retaliation is looking a little bit itchy. Leanne is in, I'll get this right, Barnoldswick in Yorkshire. Leanne, what would you like to say?
Well, I'm calling in mainly in response to the last caller, but I also have.
I love a Yorkshire accent. I love a Yorkshire accent. It's like, listen, it's like watching the last of the summer wine. It's beautiful. Carry on, Leanne.
It's actually an American accent because I'm here in the UK living on a narrowboat with my husband, who is a US or UK citizen as well as a US citizen. But I just had to call in response to the last caller who said everyone should know that Trump was going to put the tariffs on. That's absolutely not the case. I mean, he put them on Canada and Mexico, then he took them off of Canada and Mexico because they kowtowed to him, and then he put them back on Canada and Mexico. And we've been waiting in the United States for lots of things for Trump from his first term, like a health care plan, infrastructure spending, and now Americans are waiting for prices to go down.
Yes. And
they're only going to go up. So our opinion on Keir Starmer, he should be like the Canadians and elbows up. It should be there. You can't be a statesman with Trump. He's going to roll all over you, and you might as well just get prepared for it.
What does that look like, though? I mean, because you know how fond. Well, you may not. I'm very fond of analogies, Leanne, and they sometimes work. A good analogy can do a lot of lifting that more sort of dry analysis sometimes can't do. But it's hard to think of an analogy because even if he is like a shower head in the bottom of the bath, bouncing around, and you never know where it's going to spray next, it may occasionally, by accident, spray something that you want to be sprayed. So how do you prepare for it?
Well, I think it's already spraying on people in the UK. If you look at what he's been doing with Ukraine, and now, we've had to up our defense spending here, and now the Labour is going after disability benefits. So it's already hurting people in the UK. I don't think that you can help the hurt. The only thing you can do is try to protect as much against it. So I think Canada is doing the right thing. Don't allow any U.S. liquor on Canada's shelves. Yeah. Don't allow any U.S. liquor over here. I would. That's the only thing he understands is brute force and bullying, otherwise you're just going to kowtow for favor to him, and you're going to give up things that you really strongly believe in, like all of the universities in the United States that are. So, I mean, you're right.
Canada have gone, Colombia are being cited by quite a lot of people at the moment. We had Ta-Nehisi Coates on yesterday and sadly enforcing one of my fears that when the journalists, the judges and the educators are bending, there's not a great deal left to resist, except the private sector. And, of course, what these tariffs have done have essentially put the private sector in a position where they have to go to Trump and beg for special exemptions. But that's a domestic US issue. That's not an international issue. As Mark Carney has proved, they can just say, we're not going to put tariffs on the stuff coming into this country. We are going to take it off our shelves and send it back.
I think that's what needs to be done. And I actually don't think it would hurt people in the United Kingdom that much. It would actually allow people in the United Kingdom to buy things that are made here in the United Kingdom.
Or made anywhere else in the world, or the country that hasn't just launched a sort of attempted trade war on us. I've started a war. I don't know whether you noticed. I described Barnoldswick as being in Yorkshire, whereas I think technically it's in Lancashire, but sits within the boundaries of the West Riding of Yorkshire. So that's the red and white roses at loggerheads for the rest of today.
That's my ignorance as a American on a narrowboat.
Well,
so
it's
we
possible.
Did Barnoldswick, and that was the only one I could really remember.
Just to bring Brexit back into things, because I can't help it. You could have one end of the narrowboat in Yorkshire and one end of the narrowboat in Lancashire, of course. So it could be technically a bit like the reasons why anybody who thought Northern Ireland wouldn't be an issue during Brexit negotiations turned out to be so horribly wrong. Thank you, Leanne. I like it. I mean, I don't know how feasible it is. The other thing I don't know is how quickly it might all fall apart. You've got to be honest in these situations. You can't do what people like Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage do and just talk utter bills with great confidence. You've got to be honest. I don't have a Scooby-Doo about how quickly it might fall apart. I remember people telling me in the early days of Liz Truss's a fiscal event when the Daily Mail was telling us it was brilliant, Nigel Farage was telling us it was brilliant, the Daily Telegraph was telling us it was brilliant. All of these people who are paid for their understanding of matters political and economical were queuing up to tell us it's absolutely brilliant, it's amazing. And there's a little bit of you that thinks, gosh, they're very confident, perhaps they know what they're talking about. And then the people whose livelihoods depended upon the markets, the people who understood, if you like, the mechanics, the engineering of financial markets, were saying, I don't think people realise just how stupid this is. This is potentially absolutely catastrophic. People's mortgages are going to go up. This cannot sustain, culminating in even the Daily Star realising that a lettuce was likely to survive longer in the atmosphere than Liz Truss's premiership. And of course, all the people who wrote for the Telegraph and the Mail or stood up on their Reform UK platforms or tweeted about how brilliant it was, they're still there, still in post, still getting paid, still hoovering up influence, power, votes, money. It doesn't matter in this country, really. And in some ways, that's the most depressing element of all. Thank you, Leanne. Happy sailing. I know that's probably not the right word. Happy boating. There we go. When this happens, it brings joy to my grizzled heart. What is the phone-in I dream of? How much attention have you paid to this programme over the last years? Eleanor's looking at me blankly, and she's the flipping producer. What is the phone-in that I dream of? The phone-in when the relationship between caller and location is so perfect and so cute that it reminds me of that old Halifax advert about I don't know. I can't remember now. When the first syllable of the name, or the name is the first syllable of the place that you're calling from. You remember, what was the Don in Doncaster? There you go. There's loads of them. And now you'll fill my inbox with them, which I love. Because Ben is in Benidorm. Ben, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. Thank you for taking my call. I was actually about to make a serious point, but then I was giggling so much.
Thank you.
For which apologies.
No, it's fine.
You rightly, a couple of months ago, you rightly identified, you used the F word with regard to Mr. Trump, President Trump. I think that was entirely correct. And here's my point. I don't think any government, least of all a Labour government, should be kowtowing to somebody like this. I do think that it presents Starmer unusually with an opportunity. The first opportunity is to become closer, by necessity, he could argue, with our European allies.
Yes.
And the second is to tell a fantastic story, which is a very British, very patriotic story, which is the fact that Britain does not kowtow and does not suck up to fascist bullies. That's a great British story, and Starmer is hopeless at telling stories. I think you mentioned the other day that every speech needs a story. It's something that I think Blair said, and Alistair Campbell said, and Margaret Thatcher apparently she could tell a story. Yes. All of these people, Thatcher with the Falklands, obviously we can go back into history and go right back to the Second World War. All of these people have a great British story to tell. He has that opportunity now. He can tell us a story.
I don't know what it was like in 38, 39. I know the Daily Mail was foursquare behind Adolf Hitler for a significant part of that period. But, 2020 hindsight is a wonderful thing. We can see fascism in the rearview mirror. And some of us think we can see it in front of us. There's a possibility we're wrong, but attacks upon the judiciary, attacks upon the free press, and attacks upon the educators suggest that fascism is what we're watching unfold in the United States of America. And, of course, a lot of experts in the field agree. But I don't know that Starmer alone... Churchill, in fact, to stay with your period, said that you don't negotiate with a tiger when your lion is in the tiger's mouth, which would fit with your analysis, wouldn't it? And yet Starmer won't call the tiger a tiger. He has to call it a trusted ally or an important friend. And when does that end, Ben? I mean, you think it's already ended. And in my heart, I agree with you. But in my head, I'm thinking, can he do that? Can he really do that? Should he do that?
But are you not? Is your head not telling you that you are somewhat doing what Chamberlain was doing? Yeah. Which is that these people are. I mean, look, the classic example, I suppose, is the alliance of, I think it was called the Alliance of Steel, wasn't it, between the Soviets and Nazi Germany, yes, which Hitler almost immediately betrayed the second he had a chance to do so. Yes. I don't think these people are negotiable with. This is the crazy thing. I think that we could do something that might offend him.
Contextually, but that's the point, isn't it? All of the people that have spent 2 months sucking up to him got absolutely no concessions, got absolutely nothing. All the people who've already signed, all the countries that have already signed free trade agreements with the United States of America got absolutely nothing. Proximity, historical alliances mean absolutely nothing. You're absolutely right. All of that suggests that it's a waste of time. But it's a bit like asking someone to start speaking a new language straight away, isn't it? You're saying to diplomats and leaders across the world, by the way, we're not conducting our conversations in whatever language you speak anymore. We're conducting them in Martian.
Yeah, I was going to say Vulcan, but Martian's just as good.
Great mind, Ben, eh? Great mind. And that is the problem. Beautifully put. Thank you. It is coming up to, or just gone 11 o'clock. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm tempted to do a true or false. I meant to do one on every junction. I do a this. Was this or was this not actually contained within Donald Trump's tariff announcements this week? But I've already used my favourite, which was about Norfolk Island being hit with much higher rates than the rest of Australia because they accidentally, some boots that were exported and some aquarium equipment from the UK were accidentally mislabelled. So that's led to a massive tariff there. How about this one? 3 atolls in the South Pacific, home to just 1,600 people, face 10% tariffs. True or false?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 3 minutes after 11. It's the most important story in the world by some distance. But as all of our phone-ins this week have attested, it's tricky because, or I'm getting bored of saying this to you, that never happens. All of the usual tools we use to do our jobs are redundant in this context. So let's get the crystal ball out, shall we? I'm reminding myself and refreshing my memory about what happened to Liz Truss, defending the mini budget. I do think it's important to keep reminding you that all of the people who told you that it would be absolutely brilliant are now, to varying degrees, either shilling for Donald Trump or urging you to look the other way and pretend that they were never supporting him in the first place. Richard Littlejohn in the Daily Mail today writes, "What irony that Starmer's in the box seat for a US trade deal thanks to Brexit." An interpretation of the facts that is right up there with thinking that you can get that the moon is made of cheese or that you can make gold out of base metal. Truly breathtaking, but that's what you get paid for at the Daily Mail. Unless you're another columnist on that paper called Stephen Glover, who wrote this week, "The time's come to stop indulging Trump. Bending the knee hasn't got Keir Starmer anywhere, but standing up for Britain will." So there it is. Two well-paid columnists on the same newspaper, not as well paid as Boris Johnson, pursuing two completely different positions because neither of them understand anything. Stephen Glover, of course, another arch Brexiter. So these people are, I don't know quite what the word is. Well, that's why we turn our attention back to Liz Truss. These are people who either individually or institutionally queued up to describe Liz Truss's so-called mini-budget as a work of staggering genius. And it lasted about 17 days from being introduced on the 3rd of October to her resignation on the 20th. Her 45th day in office, but about the 17th since the thing was actually introduced. And I remember it. Do you remember it? It was a moment of, what's the word we want? It was a moment of frenzy. And it was a bit like this, because the phone-ins were really interesting and fun and helpful, but they were curiously unnourishing, because what we were doing together was trying to work out what was on the plate in front of us. Normally we eat together. We eat what's on the plate, and some of us might like the food and some of us might not like it. And then we compare notes and we talk about whether we like it or not. And then people like our friend in Hook turn up and claim that, well, all sorts of things. But generally speaking, we are nourished by our conversations, right? Because we end them with a slightly better understanding of the facts than we had at the beginning. But sometimes there aren't any facts. There are just slices of wait-and-see pie. There's not much in the rearview mirror with regard to what's happening in the States. And in the middle of the Trump debacle, who was 100% confident, for example, that the lettuce would outlive the Liz? That the lettuce, that The Economist mentioned it first, actually, talking about the plans having the shelf life of a lettuce. But the Daily Star, with a bit of genius mischief, picked it up and ran with it and had, I think they had a live cam, did they, on a lettuce, just watching it deteriorate in real time and wondering what would fall first, the lettuce or the truss. And I didn't know. I mean, it seemed to me when mortgage rates started going up, when the Bank of England had to intervene, when even Joe Biden moved to criticise the whole process. And then members of the Conservative Party joined in, like Michael Gove and Grant Shapps. The International Monetary Fund had a lot to say about it. Colleagues moved pretty quickly to seek to disown it. The pound fell to its lowest ever rate against the US dollar. Bank of England had to buy up government bonds because the public reaction, beg your pardon, because the market reaction was so negative, but the public reaction was not exactly, apart from Nigel Farage, who thought it was the best thing he'd seen in British economics since 1986. The general public were not impressed. But how confident were you that you knew what was going to happen? Who did know? How quickly could Trump's plan fall apart? And if it does fall apart, what will it look like? What were the straws that broke the camel's back when it came to Liz Truss's premiership? You know that in terms of day-to-day existence, the day-to-day existence of ordinary people like you and me, the mortgage rate thing was probably pretty huge. The fact that anybody whose mortgage was coming to an end or who was likely to come to an end was going to be really, really badly spanked by it. But also, it's just supposed to be good news. My tax bill would have come down if she'd stayed in power, which, as you know, is not good news, in my opinion, politically, but obviously fiscally. I would have been better off if it had worked. Cuts to stamp duty, other things. But what were the straws that broke the camel's back there? Is a question that we can only answer in retrospect. So what would a falling apart look like for Trump? Because people are already predicting it. Quite sensible people, some of them not a million miles away from the Republican Party, wondering how you get rid of him. If it all goes as badly as it might, and there is no guarantee that it will, that's why I use the word might. If it all goes as badly as it might, and already we've got a severe downturn in the US economy being predicted, the Swiss investment bank UBS saying GDP growth will fall from 1.6% to 0.1% in the final 3 months of this year. If that sustains, of course, it's recession central. Inflation likely to be higher. Analysts at Capital Economics predict it would rise from 2.8% to, in their words, well north of 4%. Remember, anybody still clinging to the idea that he said he was going to do this? He said he would bring it down. The central bank cautious about cutting interest rates because that could chill economies elsewhere. We've already been hit, and we will be hit harder by the 10% import charge being imposed upon us. And then the 20% levy on the EU and even bigger levies elsewhere. Mexico and Canada still the biggest victims of it all. So as it begins to impact overseas and at home, what does teetering look like? What does it look like? How, knowing what you know, do you think it might unfold? And I'm interested in it falling apart, but if you want to have a crack at explaining to me why it might go well, and your name isn't David Frost, someone else ennobled by Boris Johnson, isn't it extraordinary that every single person Boris Johnson put in the House of Lords has turned out to be an absolute Herbert? It's quite breathtaking. What would the teetering look? What would the lettuce look like in the context of Trump's fiscal event? I really want to know. I'm putting you on absolute red alert on this one. How might it fall apart? Would it be protests on the street? I just don't know. Do the markets move? Is America too big to fail in a way that we turned out not to be when Liz Truss was Prime Minister? And Nigel Farage described her catastrophic budget as the best he'd seen since 1986. What would a wobble look like? And crucially, how quickly might it happen? I know I ask big questions of you, often not on Fridays, but this one absolutely fascinates me. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Just looking at the words of Charles Walker, Conservative MP, I think it's a shambles, he said, and a disgrace. I hope all those people that put Liz Truss in number 10, I hope it was worth it. I hope it was worth it for the ministerial red box. I hope it was worth it to sit round the cabinet table, because the damage they have done to our party first, country second, Charles, but hey-ho, is extraordinary. So it's a market fallout, it's a government crisis, and it's political unpopularity. If, at some point hence, a Republican is to say similar things about Trump, I think it's a shambles and a disgrace. I hope all those people that put Donald Trump back in the Oval Office, I hope it was worth it. I hope it was worth it for the whatever, the equivalent of a ministerial red box is. What would that collapse have looked like, and how quickly might it happen? 0345 6060 973. And of course, we are also running alongside that question the notion of retaliation versus negotiation, and the question of, I'm drawn now. I want to have a conclusion. The problem is, if I arrive at a conclusion, I'll know that it's temporary. I could easily move in the opposite direction subsequently, but I am beginning to think we would be a lot better off being like Mark Carney than we would being like Keir Starmer currently is. That idea of just come out swinging, come out punching. Again, I'm asking you questions no one can answer, but I'm insisting that you try on 0345 6060 973. And I really don't want to use the word teat, but how hard would it be to wean ourselves off the teat of US-UK trade? as Canada is apparently trying to do. Have you seen the numbers? You know how much I love the phrase, it's not an opinion, it's counting. Have you seen the numbers of cars travelling into the United States from Canada? I'll dig it out for you in the next break. It's extraordinary. I mean, the simple volume of traffic, the number of people crossing the border from Canada into the United States has gone off a cliff. The Canadians, they say this thing, it's an ice hockey reference. They say elbows out, and it means you're not coming near me. I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me, or at least I'm going to defend myself very, very robustly. And I think our caller in Benidorm, I maybe didn't give him enough credit at the time. I think he has, by a process of rhetorical osmosis, he's nudged my needle a bit. How would you feel about Starmer coming out swinging? Doing the Mark Carney. Right, we're sending it all back. You can take your Jack Daniels, you can stick it where the sun don't shine. I don't know how hard it would be in terms of detail, but in terms of rhetoric, he's waiting. He's waiting to see if we get a biscuit. He's waiting to see if we get some crumbs from the table. He's waiting to see. And of course, the people who will, quotes, win, end quotes, are the people who will abase themselves the most. Could we opt out? Can we afford to? Before Brexit, possibly we could have done. After Brexit, I'm not sure we can. Can we afford to swing back? What does our David and Goliath style catapult look like? I don't know. I must stop saying I don't know. Except it's true. And I'm always honest with you. I don't know. So, how quickly might it fall apart, and what would that look like? 0345 6060 973. Negotiation versus retaliation. 0345 6060 973. And am I going mad? Or would it... Don't nod, Keith, when I'm halfway through the question. For heaven's sake. Am I going mad? Wait for it. Or would it be quite nice to see Keir Starmer do a Mark Carney? Hit the numbers now, you will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:17. Let's go to Congleton. Joe's there. That's in Cheshire.
It is indeed.
I do this thing occasionally where my inner northerner demands validation, and I try and pinpoint precisely where all the callers from north of Watford are coming from. And I've got it wrong already once today, Joe, so I allowed myself a swing at that. What would you like to say?
Well, I'm a first-time caller.
Welcome.
And I just wanted to say I love your work.
Oh, thank you.
So I just wanted to say, in regards to the whole situation with Trump at the moment and the tariffs, I'm slightly of the opinion that it's the best thing he could have done. For us, as detractors of Trump who want to see this monstrous figure gone as soon as possible, yeah. I think if you look at the main reason why the average American has voted for him, I think there's kind of a tinted glasses that...
I think the ones that are not fascist adjacent...
Yes, of course.
He'll make them better off. I remember when Emily was in the States, long before the election, and she said to me, it's all about the price of petrol. And I didn't get it. I didn't understand. I went away and did the reading. And when we spend our lives picking over the bones like we do, we sometimes can't see the wood for the trees. God, I'm mixing my metaphors today. But they thought he'd make them better off.
Exactly. And I think a lot of them look pre-COVID. And it's the old expression, it's the economy's stupid. The economy was, to their mind, very strong, and they were much better off than they were just prior to Trump returning. Yeah. And I feel that these tariffs will inadvertently enable them to see through his rubbish, because they will pay more for all the things that essentially they've been paying more than they were when pre-COVID. So what will that, in a sense, will lead to, in my opinion, is they will start questioning other aspects of Trump's presidency and his rubbish. And I think at that point is when you could start seeing a backlash, and then that will lead to a momentum whereby you see all those people stood behind him.
But you see, this is good because it focuses my mind on some of the reasons why I don't necessarily agree with you, because, of course, you've just solved the mystery of why he appoints absolute idiots to all the key roles.
Yeah, but you've already seen the result of that with this whole, cyber chat
Yes, but that's the point. These people can't. They couldn't punch their way out of a wet paper bag. They couldn't run a bath. How are they going to mount a putsch or get rid of him? That's Lord above. I know other people will think this is bleeming obvious, but I haven't worked that out before. He surrounds himself with complete idiots because they can't possibly ever pose a threat to him when it all goes wrong.
But it's not the idiots who are necessarily going to be the ones who bring him down. It's the
so who would it be?
Etc.
The tycoons.
The tycoons, they're the real power brokers here, because when the people on the street have less money to buy on more products, and that momentum continues to grow because he's tariffed literally all of his major allies, and that's a whole other conversation that you were discussing before mine in terms of how the UK should react to that. But if the average American on the street isn't buying as many goods, hence it eventually goes upstream to these people at the very top, I reckon that's your best bet for actually either A, shifting him to start reducing these tariffs that he's implemented on the entire world, or B, they create enough of a power base whereby some of the Republicans will actually grow a spine and start questioning Trump.
And that is what he's done to the Republican Party, or at least he's tried to. I don't think there is a correct term for it because it's not a procedure that any patient has ever undertaken, but a spinectomy is what he's done to the Republican Party since he was president the first time round, the removal of the spine. And yet there may be, if not actually in the Senate or necessarily, but the party broader might move. Vance, Jamie reminds us, is the one that is most favoured by the people you describe. And Vance, of course, on that signal exchange that you refer to, that extraordinary and egregious breach, which I used the word unprecedented to describe, but it subsequently turned out that they were using, I think, an illegal platform to have their political conversations many, many times prior to the one that they accidentally included a journalist on. On that, Vance actually criticised Trump. That's a bit of the story that seems to have been subsumed to me, seems to have been swamped a little bit, because Trump would have hated that. He'd have filed that away. Everyone says he's going to come for Waltz at some point because Waltz was the one that invited the journalist onto the call. But Vance said to his colleagues that he thought Trump was wrong. I do not know. Thank you, Joe. Great debut. I look forward to your next call. What I really want to know is what it would look like. This is strong from Tom. James, he says, you're hitting the key issue. Well, better late than never, Tom. I can't tell you what the trigger might be, but the reason why the US indices only lost $3 trillion yesterday, that's the Dow, S&P, NASDAQ and Russell. The reason it wasn't worse is that the markets are pricing in a reverse in policy. Stand well clear if that doesn't come, not least because there's an old saying in the markets, panic early and avoid the rush. So my suggestion yesterday that it is designed to create a queue of people shuffling into the Oval Office on their knees, demanding dispensation. It's not demanding, nothing, pleading, begging for dispensations, for dilutions of these punishment beatings, holds true. But what if it doesn't happen? Eric Trump, one of Trump's ridiculous children, posted something yesterday about the person that comes last to the negotiation gets the worst deal. Imagine a world in which Eric Trump thinks that he has anything of interest to say. A man, I mean, even his own father can clearly see what a flump he is. But, better, I suppose, near than far. But that's there. That's what it's designed to do. Trump, the Trump Jr. accidentally giving the game away. It is all about creating a queue of countries or businesses in the United States or both outside the Oval Office, just waiting to shout how high. Who can say it loudest? How high, President? How high, Mr. President? But what if it doesn't happen? And that's why the Carney thing is so attractive. Oh, it's all coming together now. That's why the Carney thing is so attractive. But is it naive? I do not know. Andrew is in Leeds. It's got a very Yorkshire flavour today, the programme, Andrew, and I love it. What would you like to say?
We'll try our best. So, yeah, I wanted to build on really what the last caller had said, yes, and sort of echo that the people that Trump really cares about are the big business guys, the Jeff Bezos and Elon Musks. And it's hurting them, which will get through to him. We know that this can work. The Germans stopped buying Teslas when Elon did his ridiculous gesture.
There's a great piece in The Guardian today about, and I toyed with the idea of doing it as a phone-in. Sorry, I've broken your flow, but
it's fine. Go on.
But briefly, people who've got Teslas and really don't want them anymore, so they bought them before Musk went mad, and sort of you've seen people driving around with stickers on saying I bought it before he went mad and stuff like that. But The Guardian have done a lovely piece on people who've been lumbered with them, because I presume the resale value's gone through the roof, gone through the floor, just as the forecourt market has plummeted, not just in Germany, although most acutely. But it's an example of people power, isn't it? Punter power, you could call it.
Yeah, exactly that, and resulted with Elon Musk and Donald Trump on the garden of the White House doing a sales pitch for Tesla because they panicked about the share price dropping of Tesla. Yeah. And that really did scare Trump, and it scared Musk. And what I suggest is that we let Starmer just be the man in the middle, and we, as the great British population, we make our stand. And you get to the point where Starmer is sat in the middle going, mate, look, I can't make the nation buy your products. Yeah. What are you going to do for me that'll help us get the community to buy your products? And we'll start to see the effects of this at Q2, when the financial results for Coca-Cola and McDonald's start coming out and they see a 2% dip or whatever in the UK, they're going to be braying on the door to Donald Trump saying, mate, look, your tariffs are ruining our sales in the UK. He's then going to pick up the phone to Starmer and go, look, your population aren't buying our products. Well, what can I do about it, mate?
I like this.
The tariffs in.
The problem with it is the eternal problem, the Trump conundrum, the Trump-undrum, we might call it, which is that you're bringing tools of rational analysis to a completely irrational situation. But if he says to Trump, I can't. I mean, I'm going to have to go back and say that America is our friend again, and I'm going to have to show them something that proves it, and then they might. Yeah. Open their wallets and purses again. And here's the scary bit about British exceptionalism and post-Brexit Britain is I wonder how much power we actually have as punters in the big picture.
Pocket money. All he cares about. If we cancel our Amazon Prime subscription, our Google, and stop buying Coca-Cola begrudgingly, because I drink way too much of the stuff.
Do you?
It affects bottom line. It affects his business, the people he cares about. And they will exert power on him for us.
So in a way, we force Starmer's hand, or at least we give him some extra cards.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that.
So when you go to buy a car, it's never the sales guy who actually accepts your discount. He has to go to his boss and get the discount approved. Really, he could approve that discount, but he wants to play the man in the middle and say, oh, no, we can't do that, or we can do that. Just let Starmer be that man in the middle, and we'll be the power for him.
I like it. I with the caveat that it is obviously doing that thing about toolboxes that I keep talking about, but that at least puts Starmer in a slightly stronger position than some of the other analyses we've had. But I can't shake the Carney thing now. Oh, Ben in Benidorm, that was powerful stuff as well. The idea that you just say that's it. We're not messing around. You're not coming here, messing our things up, putting tariffs on us when we haven't done anything wrong. We've got a fair balance of trade. What are you talking about? And then do what Andrew says as a consequence. Not just not buying it, but having government. So marry Andrew and Ben together, the Leeds and Benidorm, the twinning of Benidorm and Leeds. It's been a long time coming, but better late than never. And you've got punter power plus political heft. So you do, Starmer does a Mark Carney, and we'll do I don't know what has been the most successful, probably South Africa, was it? It's coming up to 11:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I've got a very important guest for you next. Jim Henderson was an aid worker and former Royal Marine, killed. I'll say this again because, as Ta-Nehisi Coates reminded us yesterday, the coverage of the ongoing carnage in Gaza is very strange in this country. I've heard some people moaning more about Sadiq Khan's Eid message than they have about the aid workers killed by the IDF, some of whom, according to eyewitnesses, were bound hand and foot, or hand or foot at the time. And of course, the family tree of a boy who presented a BBC documentary, I've heard some people give more coverage of those two things, the boy's family tree and Sadiq Khan's Eid message, than the actual deaths of British people in Gaza, including Jim Henderson, killed in April, almost a year to the day at the age of 33. And his dad, Neil, will join me after the very latest headlines with Thomas Watt.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11 is the time, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Jim Henderson was a former Royal Marine who travelled to Gaza because, well, as he told his family, they are starving. There's no food getting through. We've got to be there to protect the convoys. He knew some of the risks involved, and his family would have known some of the risks involved, including his fiancée Jackie and his mother Trish, both of whom are in the room with Jim's dad Neil now as I begin the conversation, and both of whom are free to join in should they so desire. And we're here because the Australian government review has found serious failures by the Israeli military led to the drone strikes on the convoy that left 7 workers killed, including your son and 2 of his British colleagues, John Chapman, an SBS veteran, and James Kirby, a British Army veteran. And I mean, still confusion surrounding it and a lack of satisfaction and closure. But I'd begin, if I may, Neil, by just asking you to tell me a bit about Jim and the kind of man that he was.
Yeah, good evening. Sorry, good morning, James. Good morning. Yeah.
Hello.
It was all a bit of a well.
Of course.
Yeah, Jim, he was a loyal, compassionate, loving young man, with empathy, and he always believed in looking after the underdog, if you like. He didn't like bullies, and that's what we're looking at in a lot of ways. And he was just well loved, well respected. If you met him, you use superlatives. People use superlatives all the time, but everyone that's been used for Jim really stands strong against him. He was just an amazing young man.
I mean, I sense from what I've read about him and what you've just said that even if you didn't want him to go, it would have been fairly fruitless trying to talk him out of it.
He would have gone, yeah.
Which, speaks to the man, doesn't it? And he was motivated in this case, I think, perhaps by the question of, if I don't go, who will?
Well, in a lot of ways, yes. Without a doubt. It was in his nature helping. I mean, just as an aside, before that, he went to Ukraine to help train or give courses to first responders for trauma injuries and first aid, because he said it had to be done. That was in his nature. He was always trying to help people out. Most certainly with regards to Gaza, it was an awful situation. And who's going to do it if I don't?
Protecting an aid convoy that had delivered over 100 tons of aid to a warehouse in central Gaza. We'll get slightly to what we know about what happened next, but how did the news reach you? How did you find out what had happened?
Well, we heard it. There was coverage on the news. We heard the news on the television. Aid workers have been killed, but at that time you always think, he's been in a few hairy places in the past, and you just think, well, it's not him, something's happened. And it wasn't until Jackie, his fiancée, was calling Trish, my wife, and then we thought something was up. And then she came with the security company that had driven down through the night to let us know. Before anybody else, what had happened to Jim. So, we found out at sort of 8 o'clock on the Tuesday morning, the 2nd.
And tell me a bit about where we are now, or what your concerns are about the nature of the investigations into these deaths.
Well, you mentioned, the Australian. The Israelis carried out a internal investigation immediately, and their findings were published within a couple of days, which we as a family just don't think is acceptable. You can't carry out an investigation about something as horrendous as this internally. The Australians then did an investigation a couple of months afterwards, and personally, I believe it raised more questions than answers. There's several holes in the statements as regards why wasn't this followed up, etc. And we basically don't accept it.
I've seen that, and the conclusion was that the attack was not deliberately directed against World Central Kitchen, but that the IDF failed to follow procedures and made identification and decision-making errors. It's an unsatisfactory figure of speech, this, Neil, so I apologise in advance for it. But the Israelis are marking their own homework, really, aren't they?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I mean, the bottom line, if you look, any sensible person looking at it would say, well, if they believe that the convoy had been hijacked by Hamas, even though the Israelis had, or the IDF had mistakenly identified it as being hijacked, it's reasonable to believe that it was hijacked. There would be the workers in the convoy. So again, they're just treating them as collateral damage, as they are with the citizens of Gaza. They take no disrespect for human life, and it's almost like a bloodlust in some ways. Personally,
do you believe that Jim's death was deliberate? Do you personally?
I do. I firmly believe. I've said this on many occasions. They were deliberately targeted.
Why do you think that?
It fits the IDF's. Well, in the Australian report, it mentions about starving Gaza out. Basically, it mentions that. Now that was dismissed. But if you look at the way they are operating, the way they have done before Jim's murder, and the other 6 of his colleagues that were murdered, it's the way they have operated. They've stopped aid getting in. They've come up with all sorts of excuses, and the powers that be haven't done anything. They've wrung their hands and just said, "Oh, this is terrible. You must let the aid through there." But nothing's been done to force them, to allow that aid in. And subsequently, after that unlawful killing, as I say, murder of the 7 World Central Kitchen workers there, Jim and his 6 colleagues, the NGOs, they all pulled out. They pulled out of Gaza. They had to pull out for their own safety. So they got their result there. There was no aid getting in to the people that, well, the situation hasn't changed. They were starving then. It's even worse now.
So you think it sent a message to other NGOs and other...
Well, that's right, yes. Yes, and we believe that the other convoys, we've been told that other convoys were being harassed, shot at. I mean, I think they could have taken them, without saying too much. We believe, there was harassment on convoys prior to that as well. And it was almost as if they're saying, well, the workers are going to say, look, we don't want to be here. We're going to call it a day. This is too dangerous. But they carried on. They carried on the good work.
What do you know about the ongoing investigation conducted by Israel's military advocate general? It's been over a year now. Do we know what they're doing?
No. We have been assured by the government that they are pushing every month with regards to getting the investigation underway.
This is the UK government?
This is the UK government, right. Yes. We've been told that the British ambassador in Tel Aviv is again pushing his counterpart, so that the Adjutant General's department, which we're told is completely separate from the government and the military, so it's their version of an independent inquiry, but nothing's happened. They're just pushing it. They were hoping during this last ceasefire that things would start to happen. But the bottom line, James, is there are thousands of cases reported, and where do you start? Each case, bears its own merits. And Jim and the six other of his colleagues, they're just one of probably thousands.
Did you have any contact or condolences? Did you or Jacqueline hear at all from the Israeli government? Because the IDF has acknowledged that it was a grave mistake stemming from a serious failure. I'll read their statement in full as after we conclude our conversation. But have you had any contact from the government?
No, none at all. Absolutely nothing.
Would you welcome any?
Well, I really don't know. I don't think it's worth it. It's they'll have to be dismissed a year later. It's it's far too late. It's far too late. I mean, some of the callous remarks by Netanyahu, "Oh, this is war. This is what happens in war." But whose war? He started the war.
Well, some people, I have to point out here that some people would say it was the Hamas attack on October the 7th.
Well, yes, I beg your pardon. Yes, well, if you look at it, no, two wrongs don't make a right, and this has been going on for decades.
Well, that's certainly true.
And it's something that Britain, America, foreign policy in the Middle East, it's without getting too political, I don't want to get political, but it's caused a situation. So sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees.
Of course you can't. And dealing with the grief that you and your family are dealing with is something that everybody listening is going to have nothing but sympathy for. And this isn't a political question, but as your dealings with David Lammy since Labour took office, has that marked any improvement? Are you more optimistic about getting the answers that you seek than you were previously?
Well, things have got better.
Okay.
Let me put it that way. Prior to that, the Conservatives were in power. Their attitude towards the families, or our family, was pretty poor. Pretty poor. And of course, a new government, there's a lot of things happening. So, of course, it takes a while. We obviously won't be top of their priorities, but I would say we got off to a shaky start, but things have improved over a period of time. And the last week, questions to the Foreign Office and Prime Minister's question time have given us a little bit more hope that the British government are pushing the Israelis
to provide the answers that you need, that you seek.
The answers that we need, yes, that's right. Yeah.
And my final question, and in a way I hesitate to ask it, but how optimistic are the three of you that you will ever find out exactly what happened?
Well, we've got to be philosophical about it, I suppose. It's very difficult. We can't second guess. I mean, we won't stop until we get justice. It could be a report that's going to come out, and it's going to be the same as maybe the internal Israeli investigation, which is hard to accept given what has happened, what is happening in Gaza.
Of course, and of course the ramifications of this attack, which you've described to us already. Neil, thank you. Neil Henderson, thank you.
Well, James, can I just add? Sorry, I do apologise in the sense that I was saying that Netanyahu started the war. That was maybe a wrong figure of speech.
You don't. You've made that clear.
The 7th of October was a terrible incident which should never have happened. But it's been going on for decades. That's the unfortunate thing. It's just not now. And unfortunately, people seem to be more desensitised to what is going on to horrors like this. It's sometimes, we find it very frustrating.
And of course, to that, it's an important clarification, Neil, and I know that I appreciate it, and other people listening will. But it was clear that you misspoke in that sense. But speaking of desensitisation, that is why perhaps there will be some people listening to you now who are hearing Jim's name for the first time.
Well, that's right. Yes, if they look him up, they'll just see what an amazing man he was. Such an amazing man. As the others, they're all doing their bit.
Neil, thank you, and rest assured that if we can help in any way, bring a little bit more pressure to bear on the British government in this matter, then you know where we are.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time, James. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil Henderson there, the father of Jim Henderson, an aid worker and former Royal Marine, killed in an Israeli drone strike in Gaza on April the 1st, 2024. He was 33 years old. We did contact the IDF for comment. Here it is. The strike on the aid vehicles is a grave mistake stemming from a serious failure due to a mistaken identification, errors in decision-making and an attack contrary to the standard operating procedures. The IDF takes all operationally feasible measures to mitigate harm to civilians, including aid convoys and workers. The IDF has never and will never deliberately target aid convoys and workers. The IDF makes extensive efforts to enable the safe delivery of humanitarian aid and has been working closely with various aid groups to coordinate and realise their vital efforts to provide food and humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. An estimated 408 aid workers have been killed in Gaza since that war began on the 7th of October 2023. That last bit was me. That wasn't part of the IDF statement.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10 minutes to 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I will, of course, let the family know about the commiserations and condolences that you're sending to me with regard to the killing in an Israeli drone strike of Jim Henderson, aid worker and former Royal Marine, whose father Neil, my guest a moment ago. We return to the altogether easier, albeit not exactly pleasant territory of Donald Trump's tariffs. The Washington Post have put together a rather splendid analysis of all the false things that he said about tariffs during the announcement. But of course, I think it was the Washington Post who kept track of all the lies that he told during his first administration. And unless I have actually gone a little bit doolally, I think it crashed through the 30,000 barrier, didn't it? And that's the point, isn't it, about never telling the truth, not being hitched in any way to basic honesty. And I occasionally wonder what the point is of continuing to chronicle all this. But the point, of course, is to stop you from going mad. There was truth and there was untruth, wrote George Orwell in 1984. And if you could hold on to the truth, even if you were the only one, you would not go mad. And that is, in these circumstances, what you have to do. 11:51 is the time. I'm going to go next to Lancashire, where Simon is in Longridge. And we're looking, if you can help, Simon, at the question of what the collapse might look like and how quick it could be.
Well, morning, James.
Hello,
First of all, delighted to speak to you.
Likewise.
I've been following you for a number of years, so it's a debutante call, but I turn to you for my current affairs, to be quite honest.
You mean professionally, I hope? You're not hanging around outside Leicester Square following me into Greg's after the show?
No, I'm a care worker, so I don't have time to hang around, I'm afraid.
That's for sure. Thank you, Simon. I appreciate that. What made you pick up the phone today?
A number of things. First of all, what's happening in the world is so completely unsustainable. I do think there's a danger. I think Trump's perpetuating it, but I do think America is actually going to be pushed to one side eventually. And I do see the likes of India, China, the Far East, and actually Europe for that matter, and Canada, pushing away from him and actually turning around and saying, actually, no, we're not doing this anymore. And I do feel, I was listening to the chap from Leeds and agreeing with a lot with what he said. But however, like you've said, we're not dealing with a rational person. Unfortunately, we're dealing with somebody, well, I'm not a psychiatrist, but is he a sociopath, a psychopath, or a combination? And he's certainly a fascist. So I think the only way to deal with these sorts of people, like Churchill did with Hitler, and unfortunately Chamberlain, if you remember, tried to appease him and he got stamped on. And the way that Stalin, he broke the Ribbentrop agreement with Stalin.
Yes.
In the Second World War.
Because nothing would
can't deal with them.
Nothing he put his name to was worth the paper that it was written on. That holds true across.
You can't deal with it, and unfortunately, and I admire Starmer. I think Starmer's in a really, really difficult place. I felt he handled the situation before the Zelensky disastrous meeting really well. I thought he did a good job of that. But unfortunately, you're seeing now what you're dealing with is somebody who is completely unhinged, won't listen to the voice of reason, has his own agenda, whatever that agenda is, and who knows what it is. And I just feel...
Yeah, something's got... you can't sit there playing the old game, waiting for something to happen. I mean, he's not going to invade Poland, is he? Metaphorically speaking. Some of the things he said about Greenland and to a lesser extent Canada are very alarming. But the moment at which it becomes impossible to pretend that he isn't a fascist is still probably some way off.
Well, the thing is, with the Greenland one, I think very long and hard about that, because the resources up there are so enormous, and his greed and, to be honest, the world's greed for resources, they've all got their greedy eyes upon these places. Who knows what's going to happen? You just don't know when you're dealing with somebody so unpredictable about it. You really don't know. We don't know what to do.
But they are, and briefly, the idea of Starmer being a bit more Mark Carney and actually making...
I think he's got to be, unfortunately. I think he's getting to a point where, I know it's going to be very damaging to our cars and things, but it's damaging anyway. I think it's getting to the point where, actually, when it came to Brexit, by the way, I was a Remainer. I felt that Europe had a lot of faults, but I always felt you can't be Little Britain on your own. You need to be part of something. Of course. Now it's absolutely coming home to roost. why we need to be part of something bigger than us.
I agree with that, and I don't think. And the sad thing is, of course, that you've still got people like Richard Littlejohn in the Daily Mail trying to pretend that this is somehow a Brexit benefit. This 10% tariff is proof that it was the right thing to do to leave the European Union, and much of the public, of course, depends upon much of the media to know what is going on in the world. And if the media is peddling absolute bilge and nonsense, then much of the public is, unfortunately, inhaling and consuming a diet of bilge and nonsense. Simon, thank you. China has moved. I think very recently, while we've been on air, they're going to impose tariffs of 34% on all US goods from April the 10th. So I presume that's technology more than anything else, is it? And all sorts of things. I'm not an expert on US-Chinese trade, but they're also going to start controlling exports of medium and heavy rare earths, including samarium. We need a guest on this. Sounds like something out of Tolkien. What you like on rare earths, Keith? Go on, name a few. Samarium, gadolinium, terbium. Can you get me any terbium? Dysprosium, lutetium. This clip's going to come back to haunt me. Scandium and, wow, there's a word. I tell you what, I'm going to play Scrabble with Mrs. O'Brien this weekend, and I'm so tempted to cheat to make sure that I get a YTTRIUM. It's a 7-letter word. It's a 50-point bonus for what do you call it? Yttrium? Yttrium. YTTRIUM. And that is obviously a lot more important than the average Joe like me realises, because it is largely the reason why some people have explained to Donald Trump the value of Greenland, and of course the value of Ukraine, or what lies beneath the soils of Ukraine. So there it is, China, 34% tariffs. Keir Starmer, as yet, nothing. Aled is in Cincinnati even. Aled, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I was calling to... so I work for the government, actually.
Aled, your phone line's gone. We're going to try and improve that, and even if it means moving into the next hour, because I take a lot of calls from overseas these days, but I think US it moves into a particularly interesting position at the moment for obvious reasons, and as if to prove it. Up next, it's a Canadian in Denmark. Josh is in Copenhagen. Wonderful, wonderful Copenhagen. Josh, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
Hi there. I just wanted to say that in terms of Starmer pulling a Mark Carney, I don't think, to quote another one, I don't think he's got the cards.
Yeah.
Because, softwood lumber, oil, and potash, those are things that the United States desperately needs, and they share the largest unmanned border, until recently unmanned border in the world. So, he's got something to offer. And what does Starmer have to offer? Nothing.
What about the other side of what about the quid of the quo, or the quo of the quid, where you know, as you know, in your home country, they've started taking things off shelves, and state governors, I didn't realise, could make this decision and just stop importing stuff completely. So we can't necessarily hurt them by limiting our exports, but could we do the other bit of the coin, the other side of the coin, and limit imports?
Yeah, but it's branding. It's got, Canada's got a 38 million person population. It's, their market doesn't really affect, not even in a single percentage point, the United States. So it's just, it's optics, but it works, it's good. It makes news.
And it's probably going to get Mark Carney elected.
Oh, definitely.
Which is, there you go. That's the first benefit of the Trump administration, isn't it? Is that he's essentially he's killed off the Canadian Conservative Party.
Exactly. Well, he can play the tough guy with nothing to lose, because it's going to go the way it's going to go anyway.
And that puts him in a different position. You're quite right, actually. That puts him in a more enviable position than Keir Starmer, but crucially, having a hand on taps that are providing things that the United States really needs is a game changer. I don't know that we've got anything in that field, and playing politics with things like air bases would be playing with fire, I think. Josh, thank you. I am going to talk to Aled in Cincinnati after this, but we got to, I'm a bit torn by the topic that we're going to do next. I think we have to do it, and it could be quite funny, but I'm going to do a little bit of sackcloth and ashes before we get stuck into it, because it's about teenagers lacking social skills, and I don't want to laugh at them for it, but I might.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 12, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So I think we'll catch up with the reporter who was in court for that case, because given the interventions of the ridiculous J.D. Vance, that case involving the woman arrested for protesting and now, of course, found guilty of breaching the buffer zone outside a Bournemouth abortion clinic, has assumed much more importance than perhaps it should have done, but it has, and we have to reflect that. And then we'll get stuck into the next topic. But before that, as promised, we go back to Cincinnati, where Alid is waiting. What made you pick up the phone today, Alid?
Well, James, I'm just a big fan of the program, and I appreciate. Honestly, I've become disenfranchised with media in the U.S. Frankly, I think a lot of them are sort of bowing the knee to Trump, and it's frustrating. And so I appreciate your insights and your viewpoints, and I thought I'd call and.
Well, I would benefit from yours, no doubt, as well. But that's a. Well, I wish I wasn't in that position, obviously. But it's nice of you to suggest that I am. So, which of the questions we've been asking today do you want to have a swing at?
Well, I thought I would sort of comment on. I'm a federal employee, and I had this week we lost about 2/3 of our of the employees in my office. About 800 people were fired. Many of them were Trump voters, and so the attitude shift, I would say, from November to now has been very interesting. Many of them still won't admit that they were wrong or flawed. They didn't know or they didn't think that this would happen.
Even as they're packing up their personal items into a cardboard box and carrying it out of the back door or the front door.
You're exactly right. Yep. And we've been holding clap outs, which we try to support those who have had their jobs terminated by sort of applauding them and trying to give them support on the way out. But his supporters in the office still just. It's a scary time. A little bit of.
You describe division on a scale that is unfamiliar, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What might a wobble look like? Do you know? Do you have a view on what might happen next? How things might escalate, particularly given what you've just told us about the intractability of his support. Even as they lose their jobs, they remain. I hope you don't find this word inappropriate. They remain members of the cult.
Yeah, well, that is scary. I'll say this. There are a lot of really good people who lost their jobs, and they're very intelligent, and I think this can go one of two ways. Either it ignites a fire in these people who are very intelligent, and they become politically active, and they use their voices instead of for science and trying to protect. My entire workplace is focused on worker protections and coming up with ways to keep miners safe and, people who have very dangerous jobs coming up with ways to keep them safe. And so if they change their efforts to now fighting what is becoming a fight for the soul of America, if you will, I think there's going to be a positive outcome. But I think if it's either going to be positive or very, very negative.
And it is
unfortunately
probably something we don't feel over here. Well, we're picking over, Dow Jones numbers and marveling at the treatment of Zelensky in the Oval Office, the stuff that is going on away from the television cameras. And we can read these stories about federal departments being gutted and senior people apparently being sacked on the say-so of a far-right internet figure called Laura Loomer. But we don't actually get anything like the detail that you will be living with on a daily basis. And I hesitate to ask you this question. What about the impact of what has been done to your place of employment? I mean, what might be the worst possible ramifications of that?
Well, so we have a National Firefighter Cancer Registry, where they basically track firefighters long term and look at disease, cancer incidents, and that's been destroyed. It's gone. It no longer exists. The mines division no longer exists. Entire divisions dedicated to research and protecting people who love this country and do really, really hard jobs. They vanished overnight.
With the concept of public service as well. People motivated at least in part by a sense of patriotic duty.
Absolutely. Some of the most patriotic people that I have ever worked with, and I'm a veteran, were in this workplace. We're working here, and done in the name of efficiency and improving health. And it's a lie. It's a farce. It's a joke.
What is the real rationale? Simply, I mean, we've seen attempts in this country to implement it, but thus far largely unsuccessful. The idea that any money, any dollars, any tax money that's spent on ordinary people is wasted, or is that too crass? Is anything that's not spent on trying to generate more money is a waste of money?
No, James, that's an absurd comment. People who
I misspoke. I meant the rationale is any money that is not from the point of view of the Doge people. Dollars that are not spent, dollars that are not spent on trying to make more money are wasted dollars. Things like health and safety, things like cancer for firefighters. I think a huge percentage of firefighters die of cancer on both sides of the Atlantic. But if they can't see a profit in the money that's being spent, they don't see the point of spending the money, is what I meant.
Right. You're exactly right. Government is not intended to be efficient. We are intended to address discrepancies that exist. And when you take care of people, Social Security, for example, keeps 2/3 of the elderly out of poverty.
Yeah.
And when you attack those programs, a lot of people are going to be in really bad positions.
And it's only just getting started.
It's just getting started.
Are you scared?
I'm terrified. I have 2 little kids. You know, I don't know what their future is going to hold. I'm lucky that I have options, and
I don't want to know more. I mean, I think we're reaching the point, and I spoke to Tallahassee Coates about this yesterday, where people are feeling personally vulnerable as well as professionally. And I'll take a lot away from that call, Aled. I don't want to pick out particular areas, but if I had to, it would be the idea of people still essentially waving their Trump flags as they carry their personal belongings out of the job they've just been fired from, a really important job, and then looking at schemes, projects, departments dedicated to things like trying to reduce the amount of firefighters that die of cancer or trying to improve the health of miners, and thinking, we don't need that. That's the mindset. And I hate to say it, that's the Tufton Street philosophy that I've been wanging on about for forever, it sometimes seems. The idea that money spent on something that is not going to make more money is wasted money. Health and safety regulations. I mean, it's not always true. Sometimes these things do actually have long-term fiscal benefits, but some things are more important than profit to us, and especially to federal workers or people with a sense of vocation or public duty. There is a very ugly movement abroad, and I use that word meaning outside of this room, because it's not confined to the United States. Look at what Liz Truss tried to do in this country, and they hate it. They hate the idea of a single buck or a single pound being spent on people other than them, or on things that are not going to generate more money. I mean, that was it. That's why Aled hit the nail so squarely on the head. He said you can't run federal departments or public services according to a sort of profit imperative, but they're going to try. I think that's it. Apologies to Adam and to Andrew and to Thomas and to others wanting to continue that conversation, but we've done it for almost 2.25 hours, and it's been by far our major topic of conversation all week. I want to talk next about something completely different. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll squeeze Adam in because he's been waiting for ages, and then I'll start the new subject after the next break. See that? That's proof that A, we're live, and B, I'm kind of sometimes allowed to be in charge. Adam's in Nantwich in Cheshire. Adam, what would you like to say?
James, I feel honoured.
So you should, mate. So you should. Carry on.
I've been listening for a long, long time, actually, since my early uni days in 2005 and 6, so it's a pleasure to be speaking to you. I've been thinking about this question you're asking around, what would a collapse of a Trump administration look like? And I've been thinking about this, actually, since the day he came in, and it's really hard to pin down because we're so far outside of the old rules, and every day that goes by, the standards of what I think we expect from a leader, or at least the standards of conduct in office, just drop so much further. And things that would have been nailed on impeachable offences, say 10 years ago or maybe 15 years ago, they're now just being waved away as being just acts that are in the interest of the country. And so,
that's just him being him.
Sorry,
that's just him being him. Everyone calm down. Yeah, I had a caller earlier say, why is everyone getting so upset about things? And what you're describing is the absolute upending of law and order or the entire system.
Exactly that. So I thought maybe the private sector, like, you have big tech giants like Amazon and Google and Facebook, and maybe they'll push back if economic damage becomes severe. But the truth is that if anyone's been watching over the last 2 months, Trump's already co-opted most of those players. He's very transactional. He rewards silence and he punishes dissent. So I think collapse from an external market pressure seems, to me at least, quite unlikely. And I actually think Trump treats the world the way that a coercive or an abusive partner treats their victim. He creates instability. He then forces people into reactive positions. Then he offers relief, but only if it's on his terms. So I think if there's any path to collapse, I think it would take something pretty extraordinary. And when I was speaking to your researcher before, I was saying it would have to be something like an or coordinated response from the international community, where the rest of the world refuses to be divided and doesn't flinch and does a Mark Carney and speaks with one voice. But obviously the trouble is that every country is thinking about this financially, and they act differently. So,
and is the national interest isn't always the international interest or the global interest, is it? Especially if someone splits first and gets a good deal, then it encourages the others. It is bonkers. And this is brilliant, what you're saying. I'm so glad that we took the call, actually, but the last-minute decision. I guess there's something else that could happen, and that's the thing we don't know, which is why I mentioned Liz Truss quite a lot earlier, which, believe me, I don't enjoy doing. But the sense of these, almost organic institutions, financial institutions, reaching a point where a position for a political leader becomes unsustainable.
Like Boris Johnson or Liz Truss, we saw when their leadership collapsed, it always felt impossible up until it happened overnight. And I think, Trump's power isn't actually built on strength. It's built on fear and control. And when that fear starts to fade, the thing can then fall apart very quickly. Eventually, he will run out of competent loyalists to replace them with. Then the administration will hollow out and decision-making gets terrible and people see it and the cracks show and allies defect and so on.
And it becomes
I think
embarrassing.
The only thing I can see that's big enough to bring a shock to that system and create that crack is quite an extreme but very unified and consistent response to this. And that's what makes me feel pessimistic, because countries are doing their own thing, and I think it's actually strengthening his position, which is the worrying thing. So who knows what comes next?
And you think you're pessimistic now? Wait until you hear what my friend Dan Snow has to say, the history guy. He wrote earlier today, the toxic lining to this rancid cloud. The man's a poet. That's a beautiful use of language. The toxic lining to this rancid cloud is that after massive economic shocks, the sane, evidence-led, rational politicians often aren't the ones that electorates turn to. It's 12:18.
James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 12 is the time. English teenagers have significantly weaker social and emotional skills than their peers in many other developed countries. I had a missing word round for you today as well. I keep forgetting to do them with you, because this is almost... we never came up with a title for kind of predicting how lazy tabloid newspapers would approach a story and then explaining why they were wrong. But, for example, it's quite typical on stories like this to blame A, the parents, and B, working mothers, which is why it's important to check the facts before you get stuck into the story. And the United Kingdom isn't even in the top 10 developed countries where, in percentage terms, where both parents work. We're not even in the top 10. And a lot of the countries that report much higher levels of general happiness and indeed teenage skills in the areas of society and emotion, they score much, much higher than us on both how many mums are working and how many children are happy. So we can park that as an answer to the question that I'm about to ask before we even get started. It's the National Foundation for Educational Research, and it warns that some of these kids could end up being unemployable, or certainly less employable, if these weaknesses are not addressed. And that, of course, sits alongside a story. So one of these stories is from yesterday's news, and one is from today's. That sits alongside a story about over 500,000 young people now not working or studying and have never had a job. That is utterly unsurprising if you've been following our attempts to cover this issue on the programme, but I'm afraid the answers to the why and the what of it, again, absenting, they're all benefits cheats, which is, a nice way to get through to the deadline on the column you're writing or the commercial break on the programme that you're presenting, but is of absolutely no use whatsoever when it comes to understanding the bigger picture. Knitting those two stories together is, I would argue, a matter of urgency, perhaps. But I don't like doing really serious stuff on Fridays at 12, the last hour of the show on Fridays at 12. So I think, and we've got to take I would like to take a couple of guests this hour. I want to find out more about this guilty verdict in the case of the woman who was making a nuisance of herself outside an abortion clinic in Bournemouth. And I also want to find out more about this nightlife initiative that the Mayor of London and some of his colleagues are announcing in town today, in Soho today. I shouldn't get too distracted because I'm kind of short of time, but the idea that young people don't go out on anything like the scale that my generation did, something we should get stuck into a bit. I don't know how to, and I don't know where you live, but it's Friday today. I hope that's not coming as a major surprise to anybody. Fridays are dead. Absolutely. A mate of mine was telling me he wanted to hire a pub in town. He works in the city. There's so few people around on the Fridays. They gave him a function room for nothing. And 10 years ago, it would have cost $2,000. Just okay, if you can fill this room, you can have it. It's incredible. Fridays, absolutely. It's like a ghost town sometimes on Fridays. But I digress. That's not what we're talking about today. This is going to be dedicated to the wannabe hairdresser and her neighbour's kitten. What does that mean to you? That's a test of how much attention you've been paying to this programme over the last few years, months, weeks. So a friend of mine is a hairdresser. I've got to get a new story, Keith, in this field. We need a new story here. But it's such a powerful story. And the thing is, because I know him and he told me the story, I know that it is 100% true. If you rang up and told me this, I would accuse you of having heard it secondhand. Or certainly if it came in via a text, it would come in and say. But I know that this is true because the kind of spluttering incredulity with which he relayed this story to me, after he'd listened to one of the shows about where are all these young people? What are they actually doing? The 500,000 that have never had a job. And now we talk about English teenagers specifically lacking social and emotional skills. And this guy who is desperate for apprentice hairdressers, absolutely like so many businesses, completely filleted by Brexit. We used to have an almost endless supply of potential apprentice hairdressers. He's a great boss, great company, great salon, great terms and conditions, great training, great job, really. Very, very mobile being a hairdresser. One of my mum's best friends is a hairdresser. Hello, Jane. And he can't find them for love or money. And he tells me stories about the latest applicants every time I go in. He'll tell me about a latest applicant. And the one that stands head and shoulders above all of the others is the one that he actually quite liked the look of. And he offered her terms. And she looked at, the terms and conditions. And she said, do do I have to be in every day? And he went, yeah, of course you do. It's a 5 day a week, 9 to 5 apprenticeship. Because, well, some days I might not be able to make it in at quite short notice. And so he's a good man. So he immediately thinks, do you have a poorly relative? Do you have health conditions of your own? Do you have, children, siblings perhaps, that you might have to care for if your mum is unable to, or the childcare? She was very young, so unlikely that she had children of her own. But that might have been a consideration as well. So you're thinking, okay, well, if it's a really serious reason why you might have to tell me at very short notice that you can't come in today even, or possibly tomorrow, then maybe we could work our way around it. So he says, why is that then? And she said, I kid you not, because you won't believe me unless you've heard me tell the story so many times that you know it's been preying on my mind now for months. And she said, my neighbours have just got a new kitten and I might have to look after it sometimes. And remember, he'd already offered her terms. So she was bright and she was keen. And she was unable to guarantee that she'd be able to come to work every day as agreed, because her neighbours had just got a new kitten, crucially, somehow works better. I'm fascinated by the rubric of comedy. Did you hear Henry on with Nick Ferrari earlier trying to play his carrot? It probably needs a little bit of context, but so Henry was ordered to try to play a carrot because Prince Charles was knocking about with the Vegetable Orchestra of Britain yesterday. And he came into the studio with Nick and he tried to get a note out of his carrot, and what we heard was close to silence. And it occurred to me that is much funnier than if you'd heard a sort of, etiolated farting sound or something that was just, but the fact that it was just a sort of, completely rubbish, not even pretending to be bad, made it funnier than it would have been if he'd done a sort of weird comedy noise. And the fact that it was a kitten makes it funnier than a cat. I don't know why. But anyway, her neighbours had got a kitten and she might have been required to look after it. The serious side to this story is about emotional control, stress resistance, assertiveness, perseverance, all of these things that middle-class kids have much more than less privileged kids. And one day we'll work out why. We've talked about it before and we'll talk about it again. But can we, from a place of love and affection, from a place of care and concern, can we share stories about the time? So on a more serious note, I met some rehabilitated gang members many years ago. I think I told you about this at the time. And I was raised, I think, more at school than at home, but I think Dad was pretty big on this as well. I'm a big handshaker, a big proper firm handshake, make eye contact, because I was taught it. It's not an innate attribute. I was taught the importance of a firm handshake and eye contact when you meet new people. And I went to meet some lads who'd been involved in gang culture and had turned their lives around and really made progress. And doing a little bit of, I don't want to use the word mentoring because I was no use at all to them. But I accepted the invitation to go along and have a chat with them. And none of them shook hands in the way that they would have done if they'd been to a school like mine. And I caught myself thinking, oh dear, they're going to struggle to get the kind of jobs that I would like them to get because they don't know how to shake hands. And I thought two things. I thought, first, just tell them. It's really easy to do. That some people, and then I thought, well, tell them the truth. Some people are so shallow and conditioned socially that they think it's really important. They're going to be reading more into whether or not you have a firm handshake and make eye contact in a meeting than they are into your entire blooming CV. That's just silly, right? Because anyone can have a firm handshake, but a CV is going to contain things that other people applying for the same job don't have. And I'm such a flump that I cared in that moment more about the handshake than I did about the CV. And the point I'm making is that these were boys, these were young men who had been through some incredibly difficult times. So there was no earthly way that they were displaying insipidity, if that's a word, simply by having a fairly limp handshake and a failure to make eye contact. So I don't know, they probably never had an absolute Wally. I've got to stop saying wombat. I've had a lot of complaints from Australia about using wombat as an insult. An absolute Wally marching up to them and sticking his hand out like Boris Johnson. So give me the example of the thing you've been struck by, that either generally, the proof that English teenagers have significantly weaker social skills than A, they used to, and B, many of their peers in other countries. What is it? I mean, the thing you couldn't... If you've got a story that I don't think you will you? No one can beat the hairdresser's cat. The hairdresser and the cat. No one can beat the hairdresser. If you think you can beat the hairdresser and the kitten, particularly as an employer, this is, I think, the point. Okay? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. So, particularly as an employer, the thing that's made you realise you can't hire this person, and something that probably wouldn't have happened 10 or 20 years ago. Right, I'm warning you now, okay? This is all on you. Hit the numbers, you will get through. The evidence, the proof, and it could be your own child, the thing you can't quite believe. It's not Glenn. Glenn says a handshake reveals whether a person is genuine or not. It really doesn't. I promise you. Sarah says a firm handshake signifies confidence. It will always make a powerful impression. I promise you it doesn't. Find the biggest con artists on the planet and they will all have really firm handshakes, because people like you and me, until I realised, have been persuaded to believe that it's evidence of strength of character or it's evidence of personality. You're confident, and guess what the first syllable of confident is? Yeah, see? It's a pun, that. So what have you got for me? English teenagers have significantly weaker social skills than their peers in other developed countries, and I want to know the time when did you realise this was true? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Tim Humphrey has your headline.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:36 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I quite like that. This is live cat syndrome, James. We talked a lot on the programme about dead cat syndrome. Sorry, I lost the message, so I can't give credit to whoever sent that point in. It is the conversation inspired by my friend who offered a young lady an apprenticeship in his hairdressing salon and was told that she couldn't guarantee that she'd be in every day because her neighbours had just got a new kitten and she might be required to look after it at short notice some days. And it speaks to a perceived decline in the social skills of the younger generation. And before we get too smug about it, that's probably our fault. Marita is in Lambeth. Marita, what would you like to say?
James, how's it going?
Very well indeed.
Good. So this didn't happen to me directly. It was a first-hand recollection from my locksmith. I had a lock changed recently. Marvellous. And we were just chit-chatting about the economy and workers and if he was finding it difficult to get apprentices or not. Anyway, he told me that he had recently hired an apprentice, and the first day came along and it came to lunchtime, and he told the apprentice that it was an hour for his lunch break. Yeah. So the apprentice, off he goes, and he comes back an hour and 15 minutes later, and the locksmith asked him why he was late, and the apprentice said that he wasn't, that it took him 15 minutes to get from the shop to his house, and that his lunch break was an hour.
Oh, I love that. I suppose the key test is whether or not he still did that on the second day.
It continued.
He still didn't see. He wouldn't accept that his lunch break didn't include the time it took him to get home and back.
He wasn't very flexible on the point.
And part of me, not the specifics of this case, but I like the idea of the younger generation not having to do whatever they're told by the boss, you know. I don't think it was character forming for me to go and place bets for the landlord when I worked in a pub, or pick up the dry cleaning of one of the editors when I worked on a newspaper. I really don't think it was character forming, because it can lead to abuses. But that is the evidence of a pendulum swinging too far, isn't it? I love it. And is he still there?
No, he didn't. He didn't make it through probation.
He didn't make it through probation. Why are you late? Because my lunch doesn't include the time it takes me to get back to Mum's. 12:38 is the time. Thank you, Marita. Room for more of these. You know the number. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. The cat girl, says Jim in Gloucester, probably assumed that saying what she said demonstrated a level of responsibility and trust from her neighbour. I think you might be overreading it. And Michael makes a point that we're not making today, Michael. It's a breakdown of social skills as much as a breakdown of the social contract. I think you're right for what it's worth, but we can have an affectionate snigger at some of the best examples, I think. Let's cross now to Poole Magistrates Court, where LBC's Joe Draper has been keeping an eye on a story which, if I'm completely honest, probably wouldn't have troubled the scorers in normal circumstances. But given that Captain Eyeliner himself, the Vice President of the United States of America, J.D. Vance, elected to get involved in the story during a speech in Munich in which he warned that this was an example of why Britain was somehow more under threat from infringements of free speech than it was from Russia or China, then the latest developments in the case are certainly interesting. Joe, remind us of the background to the case of Livia Tossici-Bolt.
Well, James, you're right. It's Poole Magistrates Court is not the first place you'd expect a diplomatic row to break out, and yet here we are today, finding out in the last few moments the judge has handed her a £20,000 fine for breaching that exclusion zone around the abortion clinic. And this is a case, of course, James, which the US State Department says it's been following closely, and I expect we'll get some kind of statement of support from them in the next few hours or so. And this isn't the first time, James, the US administration has taken aim at this particular abortion clinic in Bournemouth. It was a central part, you'll remember, of J.D. Vance's scathing speech at the Munich Security Conference earlier this year.
I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own.
Now, James, it is worth making the point that this is a legal decision. It's completely independent of politics, made by a district judge, but it is, of course, going to have a political impact. We know much of her costs have been covered by the American Christian group, the ADF. They're very close, not just to the American President Trump, but also to other prominent Republicans as well, the House Speaker included. And this is all coming at that crucial time for the government, desperately trying to secure a trade deal to offset some of Trump's tariffs. With some sources in the US administration saying that this particular case will actually feed into the president's decision on that free trade deal, saying no free trade without free speech. So the government does deny that that's been part of the talks, but I'm sure they won't relish the news of the verdict breaking today.
Well, I mean, it depends, doesn't it, on how much you prioritise the rule of actual law in a sovereign country over the weird whims and dishonesties of an eccentric vice president and an eccentric president. But you make a valid point. The district judge, I think, addressed directly the misinformation surrounding this story, that these arrests and these convictions have anything to do with silently praying or private thoughts, and everything to do with a refusal to obey laws governing public spaces, namely the Public Spaces Protection Order.
Yes, that's right. The judge made the point that the defendant wasn't ill-intended. She believed honestly in what she was doing, but ultimately this was an attempt to influence the decisions of some of those women who might have been using that abortion clinic on that day. And in that case, James, it is unlawful.
She lacks insight that her presence could have a detrimental effect on the women attending the clinic, their associates, staff and members of the public, which is quite generous in a way to claim that she lacks insight, as it's an argument that is pointed out to these people and protesters like this on an almost daily basis. How do we know, Joe, and forgive me, this is a tricky question, you may not know the answer to it, has she revealed that she is financially supported by the ADF?
So that was revealed at court today. It was mentioned by her defence lawyer. So she was given a grant which essentially covered most of the court costs in the case.
Which sort of removes the teeth from the judgment in some ways, doesn't it? Joe Draper, great work, LBC's reporter, in the unfamiliar surroundings of Poole Magistrates Court. Thank you. And it's so interesting, isn't it? It's a great report, that, because it highlights the political importance of something that should not be politically important, the darkish money that is motivating and driving all of it, and the complete misinformation and dishonesty that people like J.D. Vance have deployed in the hope of turning things like this into a cause célèbre. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If these people demonstrated anything like the concern for actual humans that they profess to feel for potential humans, the world would be a much happier place. I wonder how many of these people, for example, have got involved in fostering or in adoption or in any of the things that would help children that actually exist as opposed to children that could do one day. It is coming up to 1:45. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Good guest on Full Disclosure this week. I'm not going to tell you who it is. I'll tell you after this. But you could call it, in the world of woke, you could call it a crossing of the streams.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 12:47 and Mike points out if these jokers cared about kids, there would never be another school shooting in the States. It's a very powerful point, Mike. I'm not sure you're the first to make it and you won't be the last, but I will be remembering that line in future. And no, Paul, it's not Dan Aykroyd on Full Disclosure. It's a metaphorical crossing of the streams, although you're correct to identify that it is a reference to Ghostbusters. And you'd think after all these years that I'd have learned, wouldn't you, about how to, what's the word that I want, how to slightly rejig your introductions. So what did I get wrong in my introduction today about social skills in teenagers? Henry Riley's in the building. He's probably the youngest apprentice on the presenting roster at the moment. This will be helpful for you, Henry. Pay attention. What did I get? Have you got your carrot with you? Are you coming into the studio? Where's your carrot? Okay. I set up a conversation about teenagers and social skills in a way that made you think it was actually about handshakes. So I'm being bombarded with contributions about handshakes, which I, respectfully don't really want. But that's my fault because I spoke more about the handshake than I did about the kitten and the hairdresser. So I can tell you from Anna that if you have rheumatoid arthritis, you can't shake hands very comfortably. So she tells people that I can't shake hands. I respectfully nod. Teresa agrees. An over-firm handshake is extremely painful if you have arthritis. I like this story from James, but it's not what I'm looking for. I met my 16-year-old daughter's boyfriend for the first time a few weeks ago. Lovely lad. Reached out to shake his hand. And was greeted with a mildly embarrassed and confused look. He kept his head down while my daughter and her feral younger brother started giggling. They're all very intelligent, well-rounded kids, but they just don't know about handshaking. Another symptom of what I think it is that you're scratching at. James says a weak handshake is a signal to people in power that these people aren't part of their club. I'm not doing a phone-in about handshakes. Doing a phone-in about young people being possessed of extraordinary views that speak of a huge decline in both the work ethic and social skills. Raj is in Manchester to talk to me about something other than handshakes. Raj, what would you like to say?
I'll talk about handshakes as well in a minute, actually, James. But let me just give you an example of, these kids not knowing what to do and what to say in interviews. So this is an interview where there was a marketing company, and the question was, one of our biggest clients are coming in and next week, and you have a routine dental appointment on the same day. So what are you going to do? And 3 out of the 5 said, we're going to have to rearrange the appointment with the customer, with the client. 3 out of 5 said that.
Yeah, see, that's not funny. And
it's not funny. It's not funny in the slightest.
No, I know it's not. I'm just sort of because it is actually really relevant, isn't it? It's exactly what lies underneath this story. And it's a good thing that children have been raised in a way that means they have autonomy and independence, and they don't feel that when the boss says jump, they say how high, because that's how all the bad stuff happens. But a pendulum has swung it's also very hard to get a routine dentist appointment these days, but that's not the point. That's not the point, is it?
I was going to say another thing, actually. I've got one of these children, one of these English boys who's not working, not in education, and not doing anything, basically, not trying to do anything.
It's your son, is he? It's your son?
Son,
sorry, it sounded like you were just keeping one in the shed.
No, I wish I could keep him in the shed. He's 19 years old, and he does, I don't know what he's doing at the moment. He sits there on his laptop all day long. I've got no idea what he does. He says he's making some money somehow. I've got no idea.
That's a lot of it about.
He doesn't spend any money, though, you see. He doesn't spend any money, so it's difficult to tell whether he's got any money to spend.
Yeah. Does he go out much? Does he socialise?
No.
Well, keep an eye on him.
They don't socialise.
I know.
He goes to the gym every day virtually. He goes there, comes back, and he's got. Well, I don't think he's got any social skills, or very little social skills.
Well, how much of that is your fault?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I must have failed as a father.
Let's not get carried away, mate. He's only 19. He hasn't failed as a father.
I'm sure
he's a nice lad in some ways, isn't he?
I can't think of anything at the moment, but I'm sure he is somewhere. The only thing is, you would shake out somebody's hand straight away, because that's just. you know, as I don't know,
you taught him. You taught him.
No, as a cultural thing, everybody, when you meet a guy, you'd always shake the hand.
Always put your hand out and shake your hand. Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah.
But it is something we've been taught, and therefore it is wrong to judge people who haven't been taught it. But we all do it, don't we? We all do it. Raj, lovely stuff, mate. You went from the serious to the silly there, albeit that the silly even had a serious subtext. Crossing the streams in the world of woke. My guest on this week's Full Disclosure, and it was recorded live at the Leicester Square Theatre before a packed house. I even had a jar of yellow M&Ms backstage. Finally, for the first time in all my years of doing public appearances, someone respected my rider. It's only Carol Vorderman. I know you're only 2 out of 10 on your plan for how we're going to challenge some of the problems and some of the direction of traffic at the moment. And you mentioned disappointment with Keir Starmer in the 6 months that we've already had. Any sense of exuberance has gone, right? We're now thinking that they're probably on a hiding to nothing moving forward unless they can change that.
I think, as is often the case, it's about a personality, and what Farage has for his supporters. They think he's funny. They think he's the bloke, in the pub and all that. But Starmer is not, he's not a charmer. And I think for the next election, perhaps he should stand aside. Someone like Peter Kyle would get my vote.
Well, there's a headline for tomorrow.
But I do, because I think he should I don't think that Starmer himself would get re-elected. I don't say that with any sense of glee, obviously. But it's going to be very personality-led. And in the run-up to the last election, he was against a man with zero charm. Rishi Sunak literally, didn't know how to hold a McDonald's bag.
Yes.
It was like, okay, so he didn't have tough competition. but it is about personality. Less about policy, really. And I think to engage new voters, they need someone with a personality.
Carol Vorderman, my guest on Full Disclosure this week, and you get proper audience laughter. I mean, genuine rolling in the aisles hilarity, actually, in response to some of my gags, and Carol was quite good too. You can download that, of course, at Global Player. Henry Riley is with me without his carrot.
Yes.
Because a boost for London nightlife, and goodness knows, especially on Fridays, it is needed. What's going on?
It is really interesting, this announcement from the government in conjunction with the Mayor of London. So I was sent to Ronnie Scott's this morning. My first drink from Ronnie Scott's is a coffee. I was hoping it'd be an old-fashioned.
Is it a cool place, though?
It's a really cool place.
Is that the first time you've been?
First time I've been.
Oh, we
saw
love
the
Ronnie's.
Picture of Ella Fitzgerald there.
Oh, man. For people who have never been to Ronnie Scott's, if you like jazz, then you should have been. But imagine La La Land in real life. It is just the perfect venue for a sense of sort of oldie worldy glamour, old style glamour.
It's difficult to summarise it in a sentence. Yeah, I was totally blown away by it. But an amazing venue, and the idea from the government here is that they're going to call last orders on red tape that they say is currently choking pubs, clubs and restaurants to really boost the British economy. Now, they cite alfresco dining in particular. Sadiq Khan very clear that he wants to see that rolled out across the capital. We saw it a bit during the COVID pandemic, didn't we? And he wants that to be a real sort of staple of nightlife in the capital, but also making sure that your local pub, your local bar can stay open far later. How's he going to do that? Well, he's going to take the power away. The government are going to give him the power that local councils currently have, so he can override many of those planning decisions. Now, Sir Sadiq Khan was not in Ronnie Scott's on his own. There was also the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, but also... on drums. Yes, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, was also there, who confessed that she does love London's nightlife herself, and told me this about the nightlife in the capital.
Yeah, I mean, I'm supporting the nighttime economy one night at a time, but I do think there's a seriousness to this. It's £62 billion worth of our economy, the hospitality industry. And what we want to see is, you look at the continent in Europe and they have alfresco dining. There's lots of work that we've been working with the Mayor on Oxford Street, for example, pedestrianisation. So we could have cafes where families can come. We can enjoy the weather that we get here as well, and really trying to boost the economy and deregulating. And some of the duplication and the inconsistencies that we have in the system is actually start to work together to build that nighttime economy up.
And this is starting in London, this task force that you've convened, and then is the hope that this could be rolled out to, say, give Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester the powers as well, and roll this out to other key parts of the UK?
Yeah, so we're piloting here in London, the greatest city in the world. Sadiq will be very happy I said that. Andy Burnham will probably say you just lost the support of the great Mancunians. But, you know, it is one of the greatest cities in the world, and that we do want to see it piloted here.
Before I let you go, I saw you on the decks earlier on here at Ronnie Scott's. Seemed to be a bit of a blame game going on with Sadiq Khan, Rachel Reeves, as to who was sort of firing the jazz music. And I mean, who's to blame?
I mean, they're just not professionals at this, are they? That's not, you know, Sadiq does his best. Rachel, you know, she's trying, but we know who the real professional at nightlife is, and that's me.
Angela Rayner was getting really stuck in on the decks at
she
the
can make
at the
it
jazz.
up,
Yeah, she really can.
Very
I mean,
impressive.
she was citing about her previous nights out in Ibiza. She was joking about, but I mean, the nighttime economy in London, pretty bleak picture. 20% of venues have closed in the last 4 years. There are, on average, around 140,000 visitors on your typical Friday or Saturday night. I asked Sadiq Khan, was it really right to overrule the rights, the views of local residents?
I think we've got to recognise, look, if you've chosen to live in Soho, you must realise Ronnie Scott's exists. Literally exists. There are great theatres, music venues, bars and clubs here. And it's really important to recognise that, look, you know, £26.3 billion every year from this sector is really important. 1 out of 8 Londoners working in these sectors is really important. I think we can do even better. And that's why the announcement today is welcome by me, welcome from these venues, these pubs, these bars, those who work in these sectors, but also welcomed by visitors and tourists as well.
So Sadiq Khan there speaking to Henry Riley about this new initiative designed to get more people out and about in London and hopefully beyond. A few people confused, Henry. You mentioned Al Fresco. Is he a singer or does he play?
Did I pronounce that wrong? Is it Al Fresco? No, it's Al Fresco. Oh, you're making me... Yeah, no, it's outside dining.
There's a Lily Allen lyric, isn't there?
Is there?
Yeah, I got my sandwiches from Tesco. I believe it is called Al Fresco.
A bag of Tesco. Yeah.
If you missed any of today's show, it's Smile by Lily Allen. You can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily, full disclosure, of course, as well. But the daily podcast is the best bits of my show in 60 minutes now, available every day. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. It's not Smile. It's not, but it is Lily Allen. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's The Sun. It's the London one. It's about... Anyway, I digress slightly. Sheila Fogarty is here. Tom Sawbury will be with you at 4.
I love her music, and I love...
So do I.
I love her cover of Somewhere Only We Go.
Yes, that's beautiful.
That's gorgeous. If you haven't listened to it, you should.
Was it on an John Lewis advert?
Oh, I don't know.
I think it might have been.
Oh, I don't know. I've gone right northern, haven't I?
It's all going on.
Oh, I don't know.
But apparently... So this is what I have to put up with. Eleanor says Smile in my ear, so I say it's Smile. And then she writes on my screen, it's not Smile. And now she's written, I think it might be Smile, actually. Sorry, can't remember. It's LDN. It's London. Anyway, on with the news.
James O'Brien on LBC.